Chapter 996. The person they didn't have to worry about the most had actually met with an accident. Su Donglin couldn't find Gu after searching for an entire day, and Gu didn't come to look for Han Yunxi and the others either. Was he at the inn last night? Long Fei Yi asked. Su Donglin was in a difficult position. Your Highness, this subordinate, isn't sure. Su Donglin was only responsible for the safety of His Highness and the princess's room, while the shadow guard lurking in the shadows protected Bailey Mingxiang. Gu really didn't have anyone to care about. However, Gu didn't need anyone to care about him either. Su Donglin remembered that a long time ago, His Highness had ordered people to watch Gu. That was just watching and guarding against Gu Qishao, not protecting him. Su Donglin knew Gu Qishao's secret as well. If Bai Yanqing was still in danger after encountering the perplexing butterfly illusion, then Gu was simply invincible. In this world, as long as he didn't want to, who could do anything to him? Long Fei Yi and Su Donglin both knew the truth about Gu, but Han Yunxi didn't know anything. In Han Yunxi's eyes, Gu's poison skills were exquisite and his martial arts were first-rate, but he wasn't a very powerful expert. At least, before Long Fei Yi's martial arts had improved greatly, Gu couldn't beat Long Fei Yi. Previously, he had sparred with Jun Yixia, who also knew poison, but he couldn't beat him. Han Yunxi was still anxious. Something must have happened when he went out last night. Hurry up and search the entire city. If something had happened at the memorial hall, it would have caused quite a commotion. Gu wasn't stupid. Even if he couldn't beat them, he would at least make a big commotion and attract them. Either something happened last night, or something happened to him today. Long Fei Yi tactfully suggested another possibility. He ordered, Su Donglin, search carefully. There were no clues at all. They could only wait for Su Donglin to find it. Han Yunxi's heart was uneasy, she felt that they were at a disadvantage this time. She looked at the raging fire and silently prayed that this fire would leave her some remains, even if it was just a little bit. It was late at night, but the fire was still burning. Han Yunxi and the others could only return to the inn. After the dual cultivation, neither of them felt sleepy. They stood on the balcony and observed the situation of the fire while waiting for Gu's news. There was still no news of Gu. In the middle of the night, the fire had really subsided. There were only a few places where the broken wood of the house was still burning. A place like a morgue only had one function, and that was to store corpses. Generally speaking, there were three situations. The first was that the grave had not been properly prepared and the coffin could not be buried. This was considered a temporary resting place. The second was that the family was poor and had no money to bury the corpse. They could only temporarily place the corpse in the morgue and think of ways to raise money. The third was that before the murder case was solved, the corpse could not be buried and could only be placed in the morgue for protection. Therefore, even in the middle of the night, many family members gathered around the fire and refused to leave. Some came to cry, some came to pay their respects, and some came to wait for the magistrate to give an explanation. Long Fei Yi had already sent someone to the magistrate to find out the magistrate's attitude. The entire morgue was burned until nothing was left, and there was nothing that could be salvaged. The magistrate had actually given up on putting out the fire since this afternoon. Now, they had arranged for a few soldiers to be stationed here purely to prevent the people from fighting and causing a riot. At dawn tomorrow, the magistrate would send people to clean up the scene and find the remains from the ruins for a unified burial. This was the only consolation for the victims' families. Not long after, Su Donglin came to report, Your Highness, everything is ready. After the bones are cleaned up tomorrow, we will have a quarter of an hour. Cleaning up the bones was a very low-level job, and the soldiers naturally would not do it themselves. The magistrate paid for the job and gave it to 6th Master Chai, an old man in the city who specialized in helping people collect corpses. 6 Master Chai was considered a contractor, and he could always hire some young people to help with this kind of work at a low price. This time was no exception. After Su Donglin found out, he bribed the magistrate and arranged 2 people for 6 Master Chai in the name of investigating the case. He asked 6 Master Chai to keep it a secret. Tomorrow, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi would only need to disguise themselves and join 6 Master Chai's team. They could openly look for the bones in the ruins. With Han Yunxi's ability, as long as she could get close to the ruins, she could activate the detoxification system to search. In addition, Su Donglin specially arranged a quarter of an hour in the name of investigating the case so that His Highness and the princess could clean up all the bones alone. Han Yunxi listened to Su Donglin's arrangement and admired him. Su Donglin had only been in the magistrate's office for a day and a night, but he had already understood the workings of the magistrate's office so well. It's really a waste if you don't work in the magistrate's office in the future, Han Yunxi said. Hee, princess, you don't know. Actually, Su Donglin suddenly stopped talking. What about you? Han Yunxi asked. Actually, I'm very stupid. I've been with your highness for a long time, and I've learned a little. Su Donglin flattered. Besides Han Yunxi, no one else could make Long Fei Yi smile with flattery. Long Fei Yi stared silently at the sea of flames. Han Yunxi wasn't in the mood to chat with Su Donglin either. She asked, still no news of Gu? Not yet. Princess, don't worry too much. Heaven helps the worthy. Unless he ran into a poisons expert, there's no way anyone could do anything to him. Yesterday morning, this subordinate had people set up ambushes at the 8 city gates. As long as Sir Gu hasn't left the city, we'll definitely find him. Su Donglin comforted her. Send more people to keep searching. Han Yunxi could only place her hopes in this direction. She instructed, don't be too ostentatious, lest we expose our tracks. Su Donglin exhaled after he left. He'd almost spilled the beans just then. He wanted to say that Chu Shifeng had taught him how to deal with the authorities. Ever since he learned from Ning Qing that the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin had been instigated, Su Donglin had written a letter to Chu Shifeng. Unfortunately, the man hadn't replied. Su Donglin mused that Boss Chu still needs time to adjust. After confirming the location of the fire, Long Fei Yi said, go rest. We have to wake up early tomorrow. Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all. She said, that bastard Gu, could he have snuck off to the Justice Department last night and run into the culprit? She'd been mulling over all sorts of possibilities today. After much thought, she concluded that this was the most likely scenario. Long Fei Yi silently mused that it'd be great if he really did run into the culprit. He nodded perfunctorily at Han Yunxi. If Gu was here, Han Yunxi would never show concern for him. But since Gu wasn't here, Han Yunxi had no choice but to stop before going too far. Long Fei Yi was displeased on certain matters, and he'd get upset as soon as he said so. Han Yunxi would never forget how she, Long Fei Yi, and Gu had gone to the poison grounds to search for the earth of 10,000 poisons. The 3 of them had been trapped by the fire on a cliff. Long Fei Yi had supported her weight while she supported Gu's. When their lives had been hanging by a thread, Gu had scolded her seriously for the first time and demanded that she let go. She told him, since we've chosen to travel together, we'll never leave each other. After experiencing so much together, Gu was more than just their friend. He was like family and a comrade that they couldn't abandon. Some feelings had nothing to do with ambiguity, but they were still hard to explain. Han Yunxi changed the topic. Why did the culprit kill 6 girls in a row? What's his target? This case should be considered a serial murder case. She had seen a lot of cases before. The culprit either had a perverted mentality or some kind of fetish to use the same method to kill the same young girls. Or he had some kind of motive to kill as many people as he could to get something. A complicated look flashed past Long Fei-ye's eyes. He'd never thought that he would lie to Han Yunxi about other people's matters. However, even though he had the chance to tell her Gu's secret, he didn't do so in the end. Long Fei-ye had also been thinking about this case. It's been 5 days since the culprit last killed. If he wants to kill again, he'll definitely do it in the next 2 days. His words reminded Han Yunxi. She said, Long Fei-ye, get someone to go to the lake and lure the snake out of its hole. The previous victims were all killed by the Yin-Yang Lake. This showed that the culprit had a preference for the location of the murders. If the culprit wanted to kill again, he would definitely do it in the same place. Long Fei-ye nodded. Han Yunxi immediately called for the shadow guard to arrange for the female mercenaries who were waiting outside the city to come over. Long Fei-ye was used to bringing the shadow guard with him when he went out, while Han Yunxi was used to bringing the poison guards and female mercenaries. In fact, Han Yunxi's power was gradually increasing. Under her arrangements, the female mercenaries in the City of Daughters had already started to learn the art of poison. She was thinking that when the female mercenaries were able to take charge, she would hand over all the poison guards under her to Long Fei-ye. Long Fei-ye's shadow guard was not proficient in the art of poison, so the poison guards could fill in the gap. Who knew if this plan of luring the snake out of its hole would lead to the culprit? Who knew if Han Yunxi would discover the whereabouts of the medal of 10,000 poisons from the skeletons at the scene of the fire? Long Fei-ye and Han Yunxi chatted until they fell asleep. They woke up early the next morning and dressed themselves in ragged clothes. Their hands were dirty, but it couldn't hide the noble air they were born with. After all, they were the descendants of Cloud Realm Continent's noblest bloodlines, the East and West Qin imperial clans. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang both felt that something was off. In the end, Su Donglin helped Long Fei-ye put on a fake beard, while Bailey Mingxiang helped Han Yunxi disguise herself as a man and add a ring of stubble. Only then did the two of them manage to look a little destitute. By the time they reached the scene of the fire, 6 Master Chai's group had just arrived. 6 Master Chai glanced at Su Donglin without a word before tossing a pair of gloves and a basket to Han Yunxi and Long Fei-ye. Long Fei-ye didn't know any poisons, so he stayed by Han Yunxi's side. Han Yunxi began to search the area as soon as she entered the ruins. Although it looked like she was looking for skeletons, she was actually using her detox system to scan the area. Poisons that entered the bones were all extremely potent. Even if the 6 corpses didn't contain the medal of 10,000 poisons, the detox system would be able to tell as long as there were remains. If the dagger used to kill the victims was the medal of 10,000 poisons, then the poison would be even more potent. As long as there were remains, the detox system would be able to tell. Although the detox system couldn't detect the specific toxins in the water and earth of 10,000 poisons, it could still recognize the presence of the toxins. The same principle applied to the medal of 10,000 poisons. Han Yunxi searched the area carefully. She found 2 pieces of poisonous skeletons, but she gave up on them both times. This was because the detox system determined that there was poison in the bones as soon as it detected it. It was a very common poison that wouldn't cause blood to flow out of the 7 orifices. There were so many corpses in the memorial hall, so it wouldn't be strange if 1 or 2 of them were poisoned. What was strange was that Han Yunxi didn't find the poison she wanted even after all the skeletons were collected. What was going on? Just as Han Yunxi and Long Fei-ye were analyzing the situation, the shadow guard hurriedly reported, "Your Highness, Princess, something big has happened by the lake." Chapter 997. Something big happened by the lake. What's the matter? Long Fei-ye asked. The 2 shadow guards were killed. Sui Yun is missing. The murderer's martial arts and swordsmanship are very strong. I heard a cry for help, but when I rushed over, I only saw a figure. It should be a woman, the shadow guard answered truthfully. Sui Yun was the female mercenary who carried out this mission. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi looked at each other, then rushed to Yinyang Lake without saying anything. They didn't find anything at the memorial hall, but there was a result at Yinyang Lake. The murderer should be the murderer of the 6 women's case. When Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi rushed over, Su Donglin had already arrived and was examining the bodies of the 2 shadow guards. Your Highness, Princess, the 2 shadow guards were killed by a sword. Their throats were slit. Su Donglin reported. Long Fei Yi squatted down and examined the bodies carefully. The swordsmanship is really good. Han Yunxi was shocked. She knew that if Long Fei Yi approved of it, it must be a very good swordsmanship. It must be better than all the shadow guards. Is Sui Yun alive or dead? Han Yunxi asked seriously. The shadow guard shook his head. When I heard the news and rushed over, I only saw the murderer's back. In other words, the shadow guard couldn't be sure if Sui Yun was killed and her body taken away, or if she was kidnapped. It seems that the murderer only uses a dagger to kill women, Long Fei Yi said calmly. The murderer had killed the 6 women with a dagger, and they all died from bleeding from the 7 orifices of their heads. Today, the murderer killed the 2 shadow guards with a sword. Although the sword was not poisonous, judging from the wounds, the murderer's sword must be a good one. The murderer fled to the right. I've already sent someone to track him down, the shadow guard replied truthfully. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi did not expect that the murderer's martial arts would be so good. This time, they had alerted the enemy. They were afraid that the plan of luring the snake out of its hole could not be used again. They couldn't find any clues at the memorial hall, and if the shadow guardians didn't manage to find any clues, they would lose all their clues. Long Fei Yi checked the shadow guard's body again before standing up. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just said, Su Donglin, arrange for a grand funeral. Han Yunxi looked back at the Yinyang Lake. The surface of the lake was as calm as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. It was clean and pure. The scenery was so mesmerizing that Han Yunxi couldn't help but walk towards the lakeside. Long Fei Yi quickly followed and whispered, This lake is strange. Don't get too close. As soon as he finished speaking, Han Yunxi stopped abruptly and exclaimed, It's poisoned. Just now, she might have been far away, but now, she was less than a step away from the lake. The detoxification system immediately warned her that there was poison in the water. It was not that the water was poisonous, but that someone in the lake had been poisoned. The detoxification system was very sensitive to human poisons. The detoxification system did not analyze the poison, but only determined that someone had been poisoned. Han Yunxi activated a deeper examination, but the results were the same. The analysis could not be done in detail. Long Fei Yi, there's someone in the lake who has been poisoned. Han Yunxi hesitated and added, based on my experience, it should be a corpse. A corpse? Could it be Sui Yun's corpse? Long Fei Yi immediately ordered the shadow guard to go into the water to salvage the corpse. It's in the middle of the lake. It should be quite deep, Han Yunxi reminded. Who knew that the moment the shadow guard went into the water, Han Yunxi's detoxification system could not detect the presence of the poison. She said, Quick, the corpse is sinking. Soon, the shadow guard surfaced. Your Highness, Princess, there's a whirlpool in the water that's sucking the corpse in. It's Sui Yun's corpse, that's right. This subordinate can't go down. Go and call Bailey Mingxiang over. Long Fei Yi immediately ordered. Not long after, Bailey Mingxiang rushed over. After she asked about the situation, she went into the water without saying a word. However, not long after, she surfaced as well. Mingxiang, what's the situation? Han Yunqi asked anxiously. Princess, can you let bodyguard Su go into the water with this servant? That corpse, this servant doesn't dare to touch that corpse. Bailey Mingxiang's voice was trembling. I'll go down with you. Han Yunqi answered without hesitation. She could see that Bailey Mingxiang was very frightened. When Han Yunqi went down, Long Feiyi naturally had to accompany her. The two of them went into the water together and were protected by Bailey Mingxiang in the light circle. When Han Yunqi approached, Bailey Mingxiang grabbed her hand and held it tightly. Although she begged to let Su Donglin go into the water, she didn't know if she could hold on without someone holding her hand. Bailey Mingxiang led Han Yunqi and the others into the whirlpool. The whirlpool's rotation was very small at first, but it became bigger as they went down. Han Yunqi held Bailey Mingxiang's hand. She calmed down a little and said seriously, there must be some kind of power hidden under the water to form this kind of whirlpool. The bottom of the water is very deep. It won't be easy to go down. Soon, Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi saw Sui Yun's body. It was protected by Bailey Mingxiang in the light circle and did not continue to sink. But when Han Yunqi saw the body, she couldn't help but gasp. Long Feiyi didn't have much of a reaction. He only ordered coldly, let's go over. Only then did Bailey Mingxiang dare to approach. The two light circles touched each other and merged into one. Sui Yun's body fell beside Long Feiyi's feet. Even though Han Yunqi helped Bailey Mingxiang up, her hands were still trembling. She didn't dare to look and immediately led everyone to the surface of the water. After coming out of the water, Sui Yun's body was placed by the lake. When Su Donglin and the shadow guards saw it, they were all shocked. Even Su Donglin didn't dare to approach. Only Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi surrounded the body and examined it. For people who studied medicine, corpses were as normal as eating a meal. Han Yunqi wasn't afraid, but she couldn't believe it. This was because the body was soft like a human skin bag. All the bones were gone. What was the reason for killing someone like this? In addition to being surprised, Han Yunqi was filled with anger. She stared at the body and didn't move for a long time. Is it poisonous? Long Feiyi asked. At this moment, Han Yunqi regained her senses. She took a deep breath and recovered her composure. Then, she began to examine the body seriously. Han Yunqi checked the wound, and the detoxification system began to check again. The detoxification system's result was the same as the previous one. It only knew that Sui Yun was poisoned. As for what kind of poison it was, it couldn't detect it at all. Han Yunqi found a dagger wound on the abdomen of the body. With these 2 points, Han Yunqi more or less knew what was going on. She then checked the 7 orifices of the body, including the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Although the body had been soaked in water and the blood had been blurred, Han Yunqi still detected traces of poisonous blood in the 7 orifices of the body. Therefore, like the 6 women before her, Cui Yu was bleeding from the 7 orifices of the body. Han Yunqi told Long Feiyi the result of the examination. It seems that the murder weapon is most likely the Qi Sha dagger. Han Yunqi was very strict about poisons. The reason why she said that the murder weapon was the Qi Sha dagger and not the gold of 10,000 poisons was because the poison on the dagger could be another kind of poison that could be fatal. It was just that the detoxification system didn't record it and couldn't detect it. There was only one way to determine whether the Qi Sha dagger was the gold of 10,000 poisons or not. That was to obtain the dagger and drip it into the perplexing butterfly illusion. This was the safest and most foolproof method. Of course, at this moment, Han Yunxi didn't care so much. There were only two things in her mind. The first was to find Gu, and the second was to take revenge. Revenge for Sui Yun, the shadow guard, and the 6 innocent girls. Long Fei Yi looked at the body and whispered, "There's only a wound on the abdomen. How did all the bones get pulled out? And the time was so short." Yes, the time was very short. Just now, the shadow guard said that he rushed over after hearing that the 2 shadow guards were trying to save her. That meant that Sui Yun was killed first. After killing Sui Yun, the murderer had to remove Sui Yun's bones while dealing with the 2 shadow guards. Wasn't this a little too difficult? Han Yunxi was silent for a moment, then said with certainty, "Long Fei Yi, the murderer must be a bone collector." It must be. Only a bone collector had the ability to empty the bones of a corpse without destroying it. I know why I couldn't detect the poison in the bones of the coffin home. Han Yunxi said again, before the murderer set the fire, she must have removed the bones of the 6 female corpses. She set the coffin home on fire to destroy the evidence. Today, she threw Sui Yun's body into the lake to destroy the evidence. She wants to cover up the matter of collecting the bones. What does she want to do with these bones? Long Fei Yi asked suspiciously. Su Donglin, go and investigate immediately. Secretly investigate all the corpse collectors and bone collectors in Qingchuan Water City, including all the shops that sell bone ornaments. I want to visit them one by one. Han Yunxi said coldly. Corpse collectors were people who specialized in collecting corpses. It was very common. However, a bone collector was a shady profession. The so-called bone collector was collecting human bones. Collecting human bones was divided into 2 categories, collecting the bones of living people and collecting the bones of dead people. In many evil cults, there would be worship of living people's bones. The bones of living people would be removed piece by piece, and the bones would be used to carve statues for worship. Collecting the bones of dead people was either stealing unburied corpses or digging up corpses that had already been buried. After a bone collector got the bones, there were many ways to sell them. It was better to sell them to wizards for magic, sell them to medical schools for research, sell them to collectors with special hobbies, bone carvers. From what Han Yunxi understood, many bone collectors would secretly collude with corpse collectors to make it easier for them to find corpses and learn about their condition. They'd also collude with bone carvings and jewelry shop owners to sell the bones to them. The murderer's bone collector ability was so brilliant that he didn't hesitate to set fire to the corpses. He must be an expert in this circle. As long as they asked around, they would be able to catch a few suspects. Su Donglin immediately took people to inquire about the news. Although Long Fei Yi had heard of bone collectors, he didn't know as much as Han Yunxi. He was very puzzled. How knowledgeable was this woman? The murderer only wants the bones of women. Why must he use the dagger Qi Sha to kill people? Why is that? Han Yunxi asked puzzledly. The murderer's martial arts were so good that he could kill people with a casual sword. Why would he use the dagger Qi Sha? Did he have other purposes or to create panic and confuse the investigators? Chapter 998. In the face of Han Yunxi's doubts, Long Fei Yi gave a rather certain answer. He said, this matter must be related to the 7 demons' dagger. Otherwise, with the murderer's ability to collect bones, he didn't need to find a living person. He could have just found a few corpses in the memorial hall. The 7 demons' dagger was not an auspicious or inauspicious item. Was there any secret hidden in the 7 demons' dagger? Han Yunxi nodded. Now they could only wait for Su Donglin to return with the list so that they could search for the murderer. Although there weren't many clues, it wasn't difficult for Han Yunxi to find the murderer after determining the scope. This was because the detoxification system had already remembered the poison in Sui Yun's body. In other words, the detoxification system had already recorded the poison in the Seven Demons' dagger. If Han Yunxi encountered it again, the detoxification system would send out a reminder as long as it was within a certain distance. The Seven Demons' dagger was such an important and small item. The murderer would naturally carry it with him. It had to be said that the murderer hid it very well. If Han Yunxi's detoxification system didn't have such a powerful detection function, Han Yunxi wouldn't have been able to find the poison in the lake and the corpse would never have been found. Generally speaking, a corpse would float to the surface a few days after sinking into the water, and then sink forever. However, there was a whirlpool in the lake. Sui Yun's corpse couldn't float to the surface at all. Therefore, no one would ever find the corpse. The corpse would disappear forever, just like the corpse in the memorial hall, leaving no clues for the investigators. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were discussing this issue when they suddenly stopped and looked at each other. Long Feiyi, could it be that the murderer knew that there was a whirlpool in the lake? Han Yunxi asked. It must be so. Otherwise, with her ability, she could have taken the corpse away and destroyed the evidence. There was no need to rush to get rid of it. Long Feiyi said. The murderer must have known that there was a whirlpool in the lake that could destroy the corpse forever, so she threw the corpse away and disposed of it. The Yinyang Lake had always been a taboo in Qingchuan Water City. The people in Qingchuan City didn't like to get too close to the lake, let alone swim in it. How did the murderer know that there was a whirlpool in the lake? What was the power in the depths of the whirlpool? Bailey Mingxiang, go to the bottom of the lake and have a look. Long Feiyi ordered. Yes. Bailey Mingxiang didn't dare to look at Long Feiyi. She lowered her head and said, Your Highness, the bottom of the lake is very deep. With this servant's ability, it will take at least 2 or 3 days to reach the bottom. Long Feiyi nodded and ordered a shadow guard to accompany Bailey Mingxiang into the water. Be careful. Report to me immediately if anything happens. Han Yunxi looked at Bailey Mingxiang and said seriously, Be careful. With His Highness and Princess's words, the frightened Bailey Mingxiang became much braver. Just like in the illusory realm of the wordless monument, she earnestly reported, Your Highness, Princess, don't worry. This servant will definitely not disappoint you. Su Donglin, on the other hand, spent an entire night investigating the bone collectors. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi didn't leave Yinyang Lake. Since they had already alerted the enemy, they didn't mind staying here. This mystery seemed to have cleared up a little, but at the same time, there were more doubts. I wonder how Gu is doing. Han Yunxi sighed softly. Fortunately, the murderer only wanted women's bones. Otherwise, she really couldn't imagine Gu's situation. Judging from the murderer's martial arts, it must be above Gu's. He has a tough life. He won't die. Don't worry. Long Feiyi said lightly. He didn't know when it started, but whenever Han Yunxi mentioned Gu, he didn't feel as disgusted as before. Had he changed his opinion of Gu Qishao? Or did he understand Han Yunxi's feelings better? Time always passed quickly while waiting. When it was time for dual cultivation, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi didn't waste any time. Long Feiyi cautiously had the shadow guard stand guard around them, not allowing anyone to approach. The matter of dual cultivation was related to their martial arts cultivation, and more importantly, it was related to their lives. They couldn't stop for a single day in 3 months, or else they could enter cultivation deviation. Long Feiyi's consequences would be even more severe than Han Yunxi's. By the time they finished cultivating, it was already late at night. Long Feiyi sat by the lake while Han Yunxi lay on the grass, her head resting on his lap. The two of them stared at the lake, their hearts calm for once. They had been too busy recently. They had been busy in the Bailey army, in the 3-way black market, and in the 100 Poisons sect. Then they had rushed from 100 poison sect to the poison sect to the three-way black market, then back to Water City from the three-way black market. The two of them were so busy that their feet touched the ground. They had forgotten how long it had been since they had sat down so peacefully, doing nothing, thinking nothing, just keeping each other company. Long Fei Yi gently played with Han Yunxi's hair and asked gently, "Tired?" Han Yunxi looked up and saw the moonlight illuminating Long Fei Yi's face. It made him look especially gentle, like the moon and water. "With you here, I'm not tired," she replied. "Scared?" Long Fei Yi asked again. "With you here, I'm not scared," Han Yunxi replied with a smile. As long as he was by her side, she wasn't afraid of anything. She wasn't tired. Perhaps this was called a sense of security. Long Fei gently caressed her cheek before taking her hand and placing it by his lips. "Then be good and sleep. I'll call you when Su Donglin comes." Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all, but hearing Long Fei Yi's gentle words made her want to sleep. She rubbed against his thigh for a long time before finding the most comfortable position to use as a pillow and curl up by his side. Even if she wasn't sleepy, she could still calm her heart and cultivate sleep, enjoying this moment of peace and quiet. Perhaps it was too comfortable, or perhaps it was too safe, but Han Yunxi soon began to feel drowsy. In her days, she only felt like they had returned to the bamboo hut in Jiangnan's plum blossom sea. He was sitting like this with her pillow on his thigh, quietly watching the falling snow. Unknowingly, she fell asleep. She couldn't go back this year, but she hoped she could next year. She had to go back. In her days, Han Yunxi began to talk in her sleep. "Fei, I'm here," Long Fei Yi intoned. I like you so much." Han Yunxi really was talking in her sleep. She was dreaming that she had returned to Jiangnan's plum blossom sea. Back then, she had already liked him very, very much. Long Fei Yi looked at her sleepy face and didn't answer, but his lips curved into a smile. He discovered that sometimes, watching her sleep was more satisfying than tormenting her. "I knew it long ago," he murmured. After daybreak, Su Donglin sent over a detailed list of names of all the corpse collectors, bone collectors, and bone ornaments shops in the city. One night wasn't long, so Su Donglin naturally had his ways and means to take care of everything. Otherwise, he wouldn't be worthy of being Long Fei Yi's #1 retainer. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi returned to the inn to tidy up and disguise themselves as a pair of husband and wife traveling the Jianghu. Long Fei Yi changed out of his usual black robes for a white brocade robe. He held a folding fan and looked like a noble young master. Han Yunxi wore a long pink dress and looked rather playful. When the two of them walked together, they didn't look like an old man and his wife who had been married for many years, but like newlyweds. In Su Donglin's eyes, the two of them looked at least 4 years younger. They weren't old to begin with, so their usual clothes were too low-key and steady, making them look more mature. Han Yunxi crossed off all the corpse collectors' names. She was only looking for them to find the bone collectors who were in cahoots with them. Since Su Donglin had helped her with this task, she could save herself some effort. It wasn't easy to find a corpse collector, but it was even harder to find a reason to interact with them. Therefore, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi started their search from the bone jewelry store. They visited quite a few shops. Some of them hid the fact that they were selling human bones and lied that the bone products in their shops were made from the bones of large beasts. There were also some shops that told them directly that many of the large ornaments in their shops were made from human bones and were sold in imitation of beast bones. Long Fei Yi was responsible for selecting things, asking about the price and origin. Han Yunxi didn't say a word, observing the store owner and the servants in the store. At first, they didn't find anything. However, when it was close to night, they entered a store called True Love. This store was very special. The bone jewelry in the store wasn't big. They weren't ornaments, but jewelry, head ornaments, and pendants. Moreover, they were all couples' designs. As soon as Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi entered the door, they noticed that there was only a servant and a proprietress in the store. The lady boss was very young. She was cold and beautiful, stunning anyone who saw her at first glance. Han Yunxi quietly started the detoxification system. Long Fei Yi just looked at the proprietress and whispered, "She's a martial artist. She knows martial arts." Han Yunxi didn't detect any poison. "I didn't find the dagger, Qi Sha. Let's take a look." The proprietress didn't take care of them. She let them choose at will in the store. Han Yunxi walked around with Long Fei Yi and said, "Proprietress, is this the only style in your store? Is there anything special? I want to buy one for my husband." Today, Han Yunxi had already given Long Fei Yi a lot of gifts, but they were all thrown away by him as soon as he left the store. This was the first time this woman gave him a gift. Long Fei Yi was very helpless. The proprietress looked Han Yunxi up and down and said coldly, "If there's something special, you might not dare to give it to him." "There's nothing in this world that I don't dare to do." "What is it? Let's hear it." Han Yunxi pretended to be arrogant. However, the proprietress still didn't take her seriously. She said lazily, "It's the treasure of my store. It's called unforgettable." Unforgettable. This word made Han Yunxi immediately think of the signboard "True Love" at the entrance. "What is it?" Han Yunxi was curious. Long Fei Yi also looked over, seemingly interested. Unexpectedly, the proprietress took out a dagger and pressed it on the table. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were both alert. Han Yunxi quickly determined that the dagger wasn't Qi Sha. "What do you mean?" Han Yunxi asked. The lady boss raised her other hand. She was wearing a very special bracelet on her hand. This bracelet was programmed with hemp rope. There was a bead-shaped bone on the hemp rope. There seemed to be words engraved on it. The proprietress gently stroked the bone on the bracelet and said, "This was a gift from my husband on the day of my wedding. This bone was taken from the remaining bone in his body." Han Yunxi and Long Fei were both surprised. The proprietress then told Han Yunxi, "Engraved in the bones and engraved in the heart means taking a piece of bone from your body and polishing it into an ornament for your loved one. Madam, do you still dare to give it to him?" Chapter 999. Take out a piece of bone from the body and polish it into an accessory. When Han Yunxi heard this, her first reaction was, "Lady boss, what do you mean by a piece of bone?" Although she didn't know much about orthopedics, she knew that the bones in the human body were useful, and there was no such thing as a piece of bone. Even the tailbone left behind by human evolution had a hidden mechanism that had a great protective effect on the spine and nerves. Some people were born with 6 fingers and 6 toes, and it wouldn't hurt to remove the extra finger bones. Perhaps that situation could be called a piece of bone. But Han Yunxi didn't have such a thing on her body. If she had to find extra and useless bones on her body, it would be her wisdom teeth. Other than teeth being bones, teeth could also become a part of the bone. In modern times, there was a kind of bone removal surgery called bone transplant surgery. Many bone injuries would result in bone loss or necrosis, and a small piece of bone would need to be removed from the body to be implanted in the diseased bone defect. The part of the bone that was removed would grow new bone after a certain period of growth. Even in this kind of bone transplant surgery, there was no such thing as a piece of bone. A piece of bone is an extra bone. The lady boss's tone was indifferent, and she didn't have the enthusiasm of a businessman at all. Nonsense. Han Yunxi cursed in her heart. She played dumb and asked, "Is there an extra bone in a person's body? Where is it?" At the side, Long Fei Ye's brows were tightly knitted. Even if there were extra bones, he would never allow anyone to use a knife on Han Yunxi, not even Han Yunxi herself. Unexpectedly, the lady boss replied impatiently, "As long as you're willing, any piece of bone is extra." Han Yunxi almost scolded her for being crazy, but she held it in. She smiled and probed, "So, your husband really loves you deeply." Han Yunxi was very curious about which piece of bone the lady boss's husband took to make an accessory for her. Unfortunately, the lady boss didn't continue the conversation with Han Yunxi. The lady boss asked impatiently, "Madam, are you going to make it or not?" Han Yunxi didn't answer directly and asked again, "If I order it, do I use this dagger to dig out the bone?" The lady boss nodded. "Yes." "What kind of accessory do you want?" "Different styles require different bones." Han Yunxi looked at the accessories in the shop and took a fancy to a ring. She smiled and said, "That one." After confirming that Han Yunxi wanted to order the unforgettable, the proprietress's attitude improved a little. She turned to Long Fei and said, "This gentleman, I'll have to trouble you to show me your hand." Long Fei ignored the proprietress to knit his brows at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi quickly took his hand and showed it to the proprietress, secretly tugging at his robes to indicate that he should cooperate with her. How could she as a child as well? She just wanted to see if the lady boss knew how to collect bones herself or if there were other bone collectors hidden in the shop. The lady boss glanced at Long Fei Ye's hand and couldn't help but say, "Sir's hand is really beautiful." Long Fei Ye's hand was indeed beautiful. His hand was big, his fingers were long, and his knuckles were distinct. How many women in the world yearned to hold these hands? However, he only held Han Yunxi's hand. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He was casually observing the shop assistant who was organizing things at the side. "Sir's finger can make an extremely beautiful pinky ring for madam." The lady boss smiled and asked, "I wonder if Sir is willing to part with it. How long will it take?" Long Fei Yi was even more direct than Han Yunxi. "If Sir agrees, it will take 2 hours," the lady boss replied. 2 hours to collect the bone and polish it. This speed was really unexpected. Han Yunxi quickly asked, "Then what about me? What kind of bone do I need to collect to make a pinky ring? How long will it take?" The lady boss suddenly grabbed Han Yunxi's wrist and pinched it, saying, "Hand bone, it will also take 2 hours. Then let's start now." Han Yunxi asked again. 1,000 taels for the pinky ring and 500 taels for the pinky ring. The lady boss said. Han Yunxi was very incredulous. In the eyes of the lady boss, it seemed very normal to take a bone from one's body to make an accessory for one's beloved. Paying any price was not excessive. The lady boss actually didn't mention to them the consequences of taking out the bone and becoming disabled. "If I take out the bone, then wouldn't my hand be crippled?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. The lady boss's face suddenly darkened and she arrogantly said, "If you don't dare, then leave early. My little shop never forces customers. If you don't want to do it, it's meaningless to order this gift." Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and put down the silver. Seeing this, the lady boss's expression finally improved. She lazily stood up and walked out of the counter. "The two of you, come with me." Long Fei Yi tightly held Han Yunxi's hand and followed the lady boss to the backyard. When they reached the backyard, they saw 2 or 3 women carving bone accessories, while a man was forging a dagger. His right sleeve hung empty, obviously without an arm. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi both noticed this one-armed man. Although he only had his left hand, it was very nimble and powerful. They saw him take out the dagger that had already been formed from the fire and step on the end. His left hand was hammered and he used all his strength to hammer it. "That's the boss, right?" Han Yunxi probed. She suspected that this man's arm had been chopped off by the lady boss to make an accessory. She didn't know if the lady boss heard her, but she didn't answer. The one-armed man didn't even look at them and hammered the dagger again and again. Han Yunxi didn't give up. She stopped in front of the one-armed man and asked, "Boss, does your family also sell daggers? How much is this dagger?" The one-armed man just didn't care about Han Yunxi. At this moment, the lady boss had already opened the door to a side room and urged, "Come and take out the bone." Han Yunxi glanced into the room and suddenly smiled. She said to Long Feiyi, "Hubby, why don't we stop? I'm scared." "Hubby?" This was the first time Long Feiyi heard Han Yunxi say this word. Seeing her pretending to be timid, he couldn't help but put his arm around her shoulders and replied, "Then we won't do it." The lady boss stood at the door and sneered disdainfully, "You can't even bear to give a piece of flesh, how can you say you love him? Sir, you should divorce a wife like her as soon as possible." Han Yunxi looked back. She couldn't help but want to argue, but in the end, she didn't. She looked at Long Feiyi and said loudly, "My bones, my blood, my flesh, my person, and my soul are all yours. You have no reason to divorce me." Long Feiyi was stunned at first, but then he laughed out loud. He rubbed her bangs lovingly and smiled, "I won't divorce you. I will never divorce you." There was no reason for him to not want Han Yunxi. Never. With that, he held Han Yunxi's hand and strode out. The people left in the courtyard were all dumbfounded. The one-armed man, who had been keeping his head down, finally raised his head. He looked at the lady boss with a hint of sadness and helplessness in his eyes. The lady boss seemed to have suffered a huge blow as she muttered to herself, all of them, After Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi walked out of the shop, True Love, and confirmed that no one was following them, the two of them began to talk in low voices. "I didn't find the poison in the dagger Chi Sha. However, this lady boss is too suspicious," Han Yunxi said seriously. "That one-armed man also knows martial arts. I don't know how good he is." Long Feiyi said. "Why did he forge a dagger? Looking at his posture, he looks like a swordsmith." Han Yunxi said. "We'll know when we come over later." Long Feiyi said lightly. Judging from the shadow guard's wound, the murderer's sword was not ordinary. His swordsmanship was not simple either. As long as he could exchange one or two moves, he would know what was going on. Now they were looking for the murderer. 1. They relied on Han Yunxi to detect the poison in the dagger Chi Sha. 2. They relied on him to test the murderer's swordsmanship. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi went to a few more bone jewelry stores, but they didn't find anything. When night fell, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi both put on their masks and planned to sneak into True Love to test it out. News came from the Yinyang Lake. Bailey Mingxiang came ashore and made a big discovery at the bottom of the lake. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi immediately rushed over. Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin had been waiting by the lake for a long time. "Your Highness, Princess, there is indeed a force under the whirlpool at the bottom of the lake. This servant can't resist it and can't get too close. However, I can be sure that it's sword chi." Sword chi. Could it be that there was an ancient sword hidden at the bottom of the lake? If an ordinary sword was not controlled by the swordsman, it would not be able to burst out such a powerful sword chi. Only an ancient sword that had a powerful force could emit sword chi. If a swordsman wanted to control an ancient sword, he must first tame the sword chi of the sword. Otherwise, he would be devoured. The profound frost sword in Long Feiyi's hand was an ancient sword. Long Feiyi also spent a lot of effort to subdue it. Long Feiyi was overjoyed and asked Han Yunxi, "Let's go down and take a look." Han Yunxi had already cultivated the power of nirvana. Now that she was dual cultivating with him, she had already mastered a complete set of swordsmanship. She had always lacked a sword. He had also been looking for one, but he couldn't find a satisfactory one. How powerful was it to be able to create a whirlpool at the bottom of the lake? Long Fei suspected that the ancient sword at the bottom of the lake was even more powerful than the profound frost sword in his hand. How could he miss out on such a good thing? How could he not give it to Han Yunqi? Han Yunqi's first thought was the murderer. The murderer's swordsmanship was so brilliant, and he knew that there was a whirlpool at the bottom of the lake. He must know that there was a sword hidden at the bottom of the Yin-Yang lake. The murderer had a dagger to kill people and take the bones. Could it be related to the sword at the bottom of the lake? Han Yunqi and Long Fei were quickly brought to the bottom of the lake by Bailey Mingxiang. They entered the center of the whirlpool and kept going down. The bottom of the lake was really deep. Han Yunqi felt that it was not like diving into a lake, but a bit like diving into a sea. After a while, they finally felt the existence of the sword qi. Your Highness, the princess's flowing light ball can only hold on until here. It will break if we go any further. Bailey Mingxiang was very cautious. Han Yunqi and Bailey Mingxiang could feel the strength and sharpness of the sword qi. It was as if there was a swordsman at the bottom of the lake, waving his sword at them. The sword qi was earth-shattering, rushing over in the water. However, Long Fei suddenly felt the baleful aura in the sword qi. The old man Kenshin said that ancient swords were divided into good and evil. The righteous ones had a venerable aura, while the evil ones had a baleful aura. Long Fei muttered to himself, such a strong baleful aura, could it be? Chapter 1000. Seeing Long Fei's shocked expression, Han Yunqi finally realized that the treasured sword at the bottom of the lake was an extremely good item. They hadn't even found the 7 demons' dagger, yet they had already picked up a treasure. What is it? Han Yunqi asked anxiously. It's the soul of Immerse's sword. Long Fei said seriously. The soul of Immerse's sword. Han Yunqi didn't understand. She had heard of Immerse's treasured sword before. Immerse was the wife of a swordsmith, Ganjiang. Ganjiang was ordered by King Wu to forge the sword. He gathered the essence of iron from 5 mountains and the essence of gold from 6 directions to forge the sword. Unfortunately, he still hadn't succeeded after 3 months. If he didn't hand over the sword on time, King Wu would take Ganjiang's life. In order to save her husband's life, Immerse jumped into the furnace and the treasured sword shattered. The treasured sword had a male and a female, so it was named Immerse's Ganjiang. Ganjiang secretly hid Immerse's treasured sword and only gave the Ganjiang treasured sword to King Wu. After King Wu found out, he was sentenced to death and Ganjiang's soul was attached to the Ganjiang treasured sword. Immerse and Ganjiang were both treasured swords from the ancient times and also the swords of husband and wife. Han Yunqi only knew of the legend of Immerse's Ganjiang, but she had never heard of Immerse's sword soul. I heard Master say that Immerse's treasured sword was destroyed 100 years ago, but the sword's soul remained. Immerse originally had a baleful aura, and after the sword's body was destroyed, the baleful aura became even stronger. If you want to subdue it, you must first get rid of the baleful aura, Long Fei said indifferently. What about Ganjiang? Wasn't it destroyed? Han Yunqi asked curiously. Ganjiang is in the forbidden area of Tianshan Kenzo. 3 venerables are guarding it. Long Fei said in a low voice. This was an extremely secretive matter on Sky Mountain. Other than his master, the 3 esteemed elders, and himself, no one else knew about it. No one in Tianshan Kenzo has been able to subdue Ganjiang, right? Han Yunqi asked. Although Long Fei did not answer, he smiled helplessly. Could Han Yunqi be any smarter? Indeed, even the combined efforts of the three venerables could not subdue Ganjiang, so they could only hide it. Long Feiyi had seen Ganjiang's sword qi before. Mo Xia was the female while Ganjiang was the male. Ganjiang's sword qi was far stronger than Mo Xia's. However, because Mo Xia's sword had been destroyed, her hatred had increased. Now, Mo Xia's sword qi was not inferior to Ganjiang's. Long Feiyi, Mo Xia is only left with her sword soul. How can she be subdued? Han Yunqi asked curiously. She has to be subdued with her sword body first, Long Feiyi answered. So you have to forge a new sword. Han Yunqi was in disbelief. Who can forge it? Han Yunqi was stunned when she heard this. She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly exclaimed, Long Feiyi, quick! Go find that one-armed man. He's very suspicious. Why? Long Feiyi did not understand. Let's go first. I'll explain it to you. Han Yunqi urged. Bailey Mingxiang did not dare delay and hurriedly escorted them to the shore. Long Feiyi took Han Yunqi and rushed to the True Love store. Long Feiyi, Mo Xia jumped into the furnace and the sword was forged. It was because human bones can be used to forge swords. The phosphorus and calcium in human bones can absorb the impurities in the molten iron and the iron will become purer. Han Yunqi explained. Long Feiyi did not understand the words phosphorus and calcium that Han Yunqi said, but he roughly understood what Han Yunqi meant. He immediately thought of the one-armed man in the True Love store. They did not understand why the one-armed man would forge a dagger in the bone jewelry store. Now it seemed that the man must have added human bones to the dagger. The murderer was a bone collector and knew that there was a mystery at the bottom of the lake. Then the murderer most likely wanted to use human bones to forge a sword to subdue Mo Xia's sword soul. As for the connection between the sword, the Qi Sha dagger, and the 7 female skeletons, Han Yunqi had no idea. Her guess was just a guess. She could not be sure that the one-armed man and the lady boss were the murderers. However, they would rather admit their mistake than miss the chance. Whether the two were the murderers or not, as long as Long Feiyi went to test them, it would be clear. When Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi arrived at the True Love store, they found that the store was empty. The backyard was also empty. There was no one. Was it because of their test today that they aroused the other party's vigilance? If so, then the lady boss and the one-armed man were even more suspicious. Long Feiyi ordered the shadow guard to track down all the people who were related to this store. He immediately took Han Yunqi back to the Yin-Yang Lake. They did not guard the lake like last night. Instead, they found a place to hide. As long as Mo Xia's sword soul was still there, then the murderer would definitely come to the lake. They could not escape. After Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi dual cultivated, they continued to guard the lake. That night, the murderer did not appear. The next morning, Su Donglin sent a message. Your Highness, this subordinate has investigated clearly. The people in that store never interacted with outsiders. The human bones used in the store were all found by the owner. They have never traded with any bone collectors in the city. What's their background? Long Feiyi asked. This subordinate could not find out. I only found out that the store is 10 years old. The lady boss is a foreigner. She bought the store 10 years ago and started operating it. No one has seen the boss. Su Donglin answered truthfully. Long Feiyi did not ask any more questions. He only said, stop all investigations. Do not alert the enemy. They waited for 3 days. During these 3 days, True Love did not open for business again. No one came back. If they were only suspicious before, Then now Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were very sure that the lady boss and the one-armed man were definitely related to this murder. They continued to wait. Unfortunately, after waiting for another 3 days, there was still no news. There were no more murders in the city. The magistrate court had been investigating the fire at the memorial hall, but there was no clear explanation. The magistrate court had no way to investigate because they did not know that the deceased's bones had been collected. Long Fei Yi, we can't wait any longer. Gu is in danger. Han Yunxi said seriously. In these 6 days, the murderer did not make any moves. There was no progress. Long Fei Yi was silent for a moment. He only said one word, okay. He immediately pulled out his sword and with a few somersaults, he flew to the sky above Yinyang Lake. He waved his sword and the wind surged. A wall of water rose from the calm lake like a water curtain. It was hung high and constantly rushed up. Everyone who was hiding in the surroundings was shocked. No one thought that His Highness martial arts had reached such a high level. Just one sword could cause the wind to surge and clouds to surge. Even Han Yunxi was shocked. She had dual cultivated with him every night, but she could not understand his true martial arts. His martial arts had improved so much. What about her? Aside from dual cultivation, Han Yunxi had never fought for real, so she wasn't very clear about her own strength. At this time, she did not have time to think about these things. She immediately ordered Su Donglin to arrange for all the guards to be on guard. Long Fei Ye's move was cutting off all means of retreat. His action was to tell the murderer that they already knew the secret at the bottom of the lake and had the intention to fight for it. If the murderer also had his eyes on Yinyang Lake, he would definitely appear. Long Fei Yi stirred up the calm Yinyang Lake into a stormy sea. The waves rose and fell one after another. The water curtain fell on one side and rose on the other. The entire Yinyang Lake seemed to be experiencing an earthquake. It made people feel that the lake water would pour out at any time and drown the surroundings. This scene was soul-stirring. This was a magnificent scene. This scene was extremely beautiful. Just when everyone was unwilling to look away, Long Fei Yi suddenly held his sword with both hands. The sword pierced the sky and in an instant, a powerful sword chi burst out. The Shadow Guard and Bailey Mingxiang were unfamiliar with this power. However, Han Yunxi knew that this was the power of the Lust Bite. After leaving Heaven Mountain, Long Fei Yi had not used the power of the Lust Bite again. The entire lake seemed to be pulled by this power. Countless water droplets jumped up from the water surface. They were densely packed and covered the entire lake. Gradually, these water droplets became bigger and bigger and turned into water pillars. They soared into the sky and gathered towards Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi unconsciously clenched her fists. Although she knew that Long Fei Yi could control this power, she could not help but worry. Sure enough, all the water pillars gathered on Long Fei Yi's sword. Long Fei Yi was high and mighty. He was handsome like a god. Only when she saw Long Fei Yi clearly did Han Yunxi's nervous heart relax. At this moment, she could not help but revere that man. Long Fei Yi's eyes turned cold. In an instant, the profound frost sword slashed towards the center of the lake with all the water pillars. But right at this moment, something unexpected happened. A water dragon suddenly rushed out from the center of the stormy lake. It was majestic and menacing. In an instant, it collided with Long Fei Yi's water dragon. At the moment of collision, all the water froze in the air for a moment. Then, it scattered and scattered. The surface of the Yin-Yang Lake was like a rainstorm. As the waves fell, they left behind two streams of energy. One was Long Fei's sword chi, while the other was Moi's sword chi, angered by the provocation. The two powers fought. Soon, Long Fei lost the upper hand and was about to be devoured. Immerse was an ancient treasure sword. Its sword chi was very frightening. In addition, it had a murderous aura. Even if Long Fei had the power to subdue it, before he could break the murderous aura, he would not be able to subdue it. Instead, he would be devoured by its murderous aura and go mad. The reason why Long Fei provoked Immerse's sword spirit was not to subdue it. He just wanted to lure out the murderer. Seeing this, Han Yunshi immediately wanted to help. Who knew that just as Han Yunshi stood up, a red shadow suddenly flew over and flew between the two sword chi. What was going on? Everyone was very surprised. If the murderer had appeared, the murderer would not be so stupid as to court death. It was impossible to estimate how powerful the two sword chis were. If it was not courting death, what was it? That person seems to have been thrown over. Su Donglin muttered. It seems to be Gu. Bailey Mingxiang was shocked. Gu! Han Yunshi shouted and flew out. However, when Gu approached the sword chi again, a few thorny vines suddenly sprang out from the lake and pulled him back. At this time, everyone could see clearly. They saw that Gu was tied up. His body was covered with human bones. There were even 7 human bones hanging on his waist. What was going on? Long Fei frowned and looked over while resisting Immerse's sword chi. He did not care about what happened to Gu. He only wanted to know where the murderer was. Chapter 1001. Where was the murderer? Gu had already appeared, but the murderer still hadn't appeared. The human bones hanging on Gu's body were clearly the 7 that the murderer had collected before. Long Fei was almost unable to withstand Immerse's sword energy. A hint of displeasure flashed past his eyes. He suddenly put away his long sword and leaned to the side at the same time. In an instant, Immerse's sword energy flew over and whizzed past his back. He immediately raised his sword and slashed viciously at Gu. Han Yunshi, Su Donglin, and the others were about to go over to help, but they stopped abruptly when they saw this scene. What was Long Fei doing? Fuck! Long Fei, what's the meaning of this? Gu roared. They hadn't seen each other for a few days, but his temper was still the same. However, before Long Fei's sword energy could hit Gu, a powerful sword energy slashed from the right and deflected Long Fei's sword energy. The murderer had finally appeared. Long Fei was shocked. He didn't expect the murderer's swordsmanship to be twice as strong as he had expected. There were only a handful of people in the world who could deflect his sword energy. Long Fei and Gu looked to the right at the same time. They saw a man standing in the air with a human bone mask on his face. He held a long sword in his left hand and his right sleeve was empty. It was a severed arm. It was him, the one-armed man from True Love's shop. Where was the lady boss? Where was the 7 demons' dagger? Han Yunshi didn't detect the poison in the 7 demons' dagger. She was on guard and whispered, Su Donglin, the lady boss hasn't arrived yet. It seems that both of them came to kill Sui Yun that day. The shadow guard only saw the lady boss and didn't see the one-armed man. That day, both the lady boss and the one-armed man had come. The one-armed man had killed the lady boss and bought time for the lady boss to retrieve the bone. Otherwise, the speed would not have been so fast. Han Yunshi didn't have the time to think about why these 2 people didn't throw the 6 female corpses into the lake, and why did they set fire to the memorial hall. Why did they directly throw Sui Yun into the lake after killing her? She would leave the culprit to Gu and Long Fei. She and Su Donglin had to guard against the lady boss. After all, the Qi Sha dagger was in the lady boss's hands. She couldn't detoxify the poison on the weapon. At this moment, Immerse's sword chi filled the entire Enyang Lake and did not sink to the bottom of the lake. After Long Fei Yi saw the murderer, he was not in a hurry to catch him. He waved his sword again and slashed at Gu. Unexpectedly, the murderer also attacked Gu. With a wave of his sword, he actually shot out a blue flame. Sword fire. Long Fei Yi was shocked. The so-called sword fire was created by a swordsmith who had been forging swords for 10 to 20 years and infused the essence of the furnace fire into the sword chi. Once it was burned by the sword fire, even water could not extinguish it. Only a stronger sword chi could extinguish the sword fire. Needless to say, the murderer's swordsmanship had exceeded Long Fei Yi's expectations time and time again. How could such an expert not be from Kenzo? Just as Long Fei Yi was about to extinguish the sword fire, Gu suddenly used the power of the vines to face the sword fire head-on. At this moment, Long Fei Yi almost scolded Gu for courting death. But he quickly realized that something was wrong. Gu seemed to be waiting for this moment. This guy had been missing for so many days. What did he do? What was he trying to do now? Long Fei Yi did not block the sword fire. Once the sword fire touched Gu, it immediately ignited all the bones in his body. What was unbelievable was that the burning flames were all black. As the flames burned, everyone felt a sinister aura. At this moment, the culprit suddenly cut through the brambles by the lake. Gu Qishao was surrounded by a ball of fire as he fell into the water. Once he fell into the water, Immerse's sword chi that permeated the water gathered around him. With the help of the sword chi, the black sword fire burned even more vigorously. Everyone could clearly feel the sword chi surging up from the center of the lake. Han Yunxi did not expect the situation to develop like this. She saw Gu taking the initiative to fly into the sword fire. But she did not have time to think about the reason. At this moment, there was only one thought in her mind. Gu will die. Suddenly, she exclaimed, Gu. Gu will die. Long Fei Yi, quickly save him. Long Fei Yi could really save people. He also knew how to save people. Although the one-armed man's swordsmanship was superb, it was still below his. Otherwise, his sword chi would not have been deflected, but directly shattered. His sword chi was still strong against the one-armed man. So, his sword chi could extinguish the sword fire that the one-armed man refined. But, if he extinguished the sword fire now, Immerse's sword spirit would probably sink to the bottom of the lake forever. He did not know why Gu did this. But one thing was for sure. Gu was definitely aiming for Immerse's sword spirit. Long Fei Yi was hesitating whether to save. Han Yunxi suddenly stopped shouting. She looked to the left and shouted, Long Fei Yi, be careful of poison. Long Fei Yi immediately leaped into the air. A dagger flew past his feet. This dagger was none other than the Seven Demons' dagger. After Long Fei Yi dodged, he immediately tried to snatch the Seven Demons' dagger. However, the one-armed man was very close to the Seven Demons' dagger. He did not try to snatch it. Instead, he swung his sword and swept the Seven Demons' dagger towards Gu. Everything happened very suddenly. No one had time to think, let alone defend. Just like that, everyone watched as the Seven Demons' dagger sank into the fireball. At this moment, the raging fire had completely engulfed Gu. Blood dripped from the fireball. At first, it was very little. It was so little that no one noticed it. But, gradually, it became more. Han Yunxi saw it clearly. She regained her senses and shouted, save him. She flew over, but it was too late. The fireball sank into the water. After the entire fireball was swallowed up by the lake, the entire surface of the lake suddenly began to burn up. It was like a huge furnace that was ignited by a raging fire. Han Yunxi finally understood. 7 female corpses, the 7 demons' dagger, and the sword fire. The murderer put these 3 things together with Gu and used the yin-yang lake as a furnace to forge a sword. As long as the sword was forged, Mo's sword spirit hidden at the bottom of the yin-yang lake would attach itself to the new sword. Damn it! What did they take Gu for? At this moment, the lady boss flew out of the forest and landed beside the one-armed man. She looked at the raging fire and smiled. It's beautiful. As long as you like it, the one-armed man said lightly. Han Yunxi angrily rushed to the sky and shouted, "Tell me how to stop this, or I'll kill you." She didn't know if it was too late to stop the calcining process, but this was the only solution she could think of. The lady boss was very disdainful of Han Yunxi, and the man ignored her. Long Fei Yi chased after them. He had never been so hesitant before. He knew very well that Gu would not die, and it was very likely that he would be able to control the newly forged sword. But how should he explain this to Han Yunxi? Damn it, I don't want to explain this at all. Gu Qishao should be the one to do the explaining himself. Gu should bear the consequences of deceiving Han Yunxi and bear Han Yunxi's anger. Long Fei Yi simply ignored it and waited for Gu to walk out of the sea of fire unscathed. Protecting Han Yunxi was his job. He did not mind pretending that he did not know anything later. He was not afraid of Han Yunxi crying, but he was afraid of Han Yunxi getting angry. "You crazy woman, what do you know about true love?" Han Yunxi roared at the lady boss. The lady boss laughed. "Are you asking me? Even if I tell you, you won't understand. I will tell you what true love is." Han Yunxi's killing intent soared, not noticing Long Fei Ye's hesitant expression. She suddenly snatched Long Fei Ye's profound frost sword and attacked the man with the broken arm. The man with the broken arm pulled the lady boss and dodged together, causing the lady boss to laugh even louder. Han Yunxi continued to attack, but Long Fei Yi only followed behind her and did not make a move. He knew that Han Yunxi was not going to use the sword. Indeed, when the man dodged again and again, Han Yunxi's other hand suddenly shot out dozens of golden needles. The golden needles that Han Yunxi shot out were no longer as weak as before. There was no layout and no angle. Now, the power of each golden needle was hard to ignore. Moreover, the overall layout and angle were very tricky. If one dodged one, they would not be able to dodge the other. It was like a formation that could not be escaped. The man with the broken arm was finally shocked, realizing that Han Yunxi was not easy to deal with. But unfortunately, it was too late. He was hit by 2 golden needles in succession, and in order to protect the lady boss, he was hit by 3 more. He brought the lady boss and landed on the ground. The bones all over his body were unbearably painful, but he still protected the lady boss behind him. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi also landed. Han Yunxi angrily said to the lady boss, "Do you love him? Do you know what true love is? If you do, then tell me how to extinguish the sword fire, otherwise, I guarantee that in half a cup of tea's time, all the bones in his body will be crushed in half a cup of tea's time." The lady boss's bone-gathering technique was very fast, but it was far from Han Yunxi's poison speed. Who knew that before the lady boss spoke, the one who spoke was the man with the broken arm? He said, "The sword spirit has already been hooked out, this fire can't be extinguished. It's useless even if you kill me. If you die, she will definitely be very, very miserable, I guarantee it." When Han Yunxi became ruthless, she was really not to be trifled with. She said darkly and coldly, "Unless you kill her with your own hands before you die." Her words immediately stunned the man with the broken arm. Long Fei Yi was also stunned. At first, he thought that Han Yunxi had bet on the wrong person, thinking that Han Yunshi should have poisoned the lady boss, and that between the man with the broken arm and the lady boss, the man with the broken arm would be more affectionate. Who knew that Han Yunshi would actually use this method to threaten the man with the broken arm? Yes, if he died, what would happen to the lady boss? You don't have much time. Gu is going to die. I want all of you to die with him. Han Yunshi warned gloomily. The man with the broken arm's eyes were filled with fear. If you help me detoxify the poison, I will extinguish the sword fire. You have no right to negotiate with me. Han Yunshi said angrily. The lady boss had been smiling the whole time, like a playful child, but more like a heartless spectator. The man with the broken arm looked at the woman, full of helplessness and adoration. Chapter 1002. The one-armed man had no other choice. Just as he was about to raise his sword to extinguish the sword fire, a huge fireball suddenly flew out from the blazing flames and soared high into the sky. What was that? Everyone was very surprised and their attention followed. But unexpectedly, after the fireball soared into the sky, the huge lake's surface suddenly flashed with sword light, and in an instant, the entire forest was illuminated. Long Fei Yi hurriedly turned sideways and used his body to block the sword light for Han Yunshi and retreated far away. The one-armed man followed closely behind and protected the lady boss. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang were a step slower and were all injured by the sword qi. Wounds appeared on their bodies caused by the sword light. The powerful sword light did not stay on the lake's surface for long as it rapidly converged towards the center of the lake. Following the convergence of the sword light, the blazing flames on the lake's surface also converged towards the center of the lake. The sword gleam and the flames, one white and one black, rose and fell in waves, winding and surging like waves, beautiful, magnificent, 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 and magnificent. Everyone was attracted by the beautiful scenery and forgot about the sword wounds on their bodies. Han Yunshi raised her head and looked at the fireball and muttered, "Long Fei Yi, is that Shao Qi? Is Shao Qi still alive?" The moment she finished speaking, all the flames suddenly surged past the sword light and rushed towards the huge fireball in the sky. The flames merged into the fireball and immediately ignited the huge fireball. The huge fireball suddenly swelled up like the sun and illuminated the entire world. Everyone was shocked by this scene. After the huge fireball swelled up, the sword light waves in the lake suddenly surged like stormy waves. With lightning speed, they converged at the center of the lake and soared into the sky, directly attacking the huge fireball. The speed of this force caught everyone off guard. The strength of this force made everyone unable to stop it. The wonder of this force made everyone feel reverence. When the sword light collided with the huge fireball, an unexpected scene happened again. The blazing flames of the huge fireball suddenly extinguished. The fire was extinguished, but no one could see Gu. They could only see a big ball of vines. The vines were very dense, covering everything inside the ball tightly. It was impossible to see whether the person inside was alive or dead. What was most inconceivable was that the vines were actually lush and green, and there were no signs of them being burned. The Qi Sha dagger stabbed into the thorny vines, but he didn't know if the dagger had stabbed the person inside. How could this be? How? The one-armed man was shocked. He had clearly cut off the vines. Shouldn't the vines protecting Gu have withered? Moreover, even if it didn't wither, shouldn't it have been destroyed by the sword fire? How could he still protect him? What was going on? In order to destroy the murderous aura of Mo's sword spirit and forge a sword to subdue Mo's sword spirit, one must use the most bones, the most murderous flesh, the most metal, and the most murderous sword fire to forge the sword. He had gathered everything, and when Long Fei Yi lured Mo's sword qi out of the lake, he acted in a timely manner. Why did he still fail? The sword fire had already been ignited, and it had already burned the entire lake. Once it started burning, it would definitely burn for 49 days. Only after 49 days of burning could the Chi Sha dagger be melted, and only then could the murderous aura of the sword spirit be extinguished. At that time, he would add iron to forge a sharp sword, and then he would be able to subdue Immerse's sword spirit. Although he couldn't subdue Immerse for the time being, he could trap Immerse's sword spirit in the sword, and control it in his own hands. Everything was planned perfectly. Even if Long Fei Ye's appearance interfered with his plan, he still smoothly obtained the 7 female skeletons, and found the body of the most murderous aura. Why did he fail at the last step? Could it be that the dagger he swung just now didn't stab Gu? No. He believed that his sword wouldn't have missed. Gu had just lost so much blood, it was impossible that he wasn't injured by the dagger. The one-armed man hugged the lady boss tightly, and looked at everything in a daze. Everything had clearly failed, but he still didn't escape. He wasn't willing, he wanted an answer. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were also very surprised. Long Feiyi knew that Gu wouldn't die, but he didn't expect that Gu's bramble vines would have such great power, and actually be able to block the sword fire. Han Yunxi immediately activated the detoxification system, but unfortunately, she couldn't check whether Gu was poisoned or not. Very quickly, the sword aura replaced the flames, and surrounded Gu. Under the illumination of the white light, the lush bramble vines gave people a feeling of vitality. The sword aura that was originally filled with murderous aura, why did it become like this? Everyone couldn't see death, but instead saw a new hope. Everyone then realized that the murderous aura of Immerse's sword aura had disappeared. Long Feiyi, Shaoqi won't die, he definitely won't die, right? Han Yunxi murmured. Long Feiyi originally wanted to answer, yes, but looking at the light in the air, he unconsciously changed his words, and murmured, Han Yunxi, if Gu dies, will you cry? Yes. Han Yunxi didn't think, Long Feiyi, no matter who dies among our friends, I will cry. What about me? Long Feiyi turned to look at her, what about me? No. Han Yunxi murmured, I will die, so you have to live well. Long Feiyi smiled bitterly, helpless and powerless, he could only smile bitterly. And at this moment, under the nourishment of the sword aura, the thorny vines and leaves bloomed with demonic red thorny flowers. Looking from afar, it was like fire, like blood, so beautiful. Everyone was stunned. Gradually, a fiery red light flowed out from the bottom of the lake. Different from the sword aura's sharpness, this red light was very gentle, and flowed gracefully up the sword aura. It's the sword spirit, Immerse's sword spirit has come out. Long Feiyi murmured to himself. When the red light touched the thorny vines, the dense thorny vines suddenly loosened, and fell down in circles, thorny flower petals fluttering in the air. Everyone finally saw Gu Qishao. He wasn't burned by the sword fire, and the dagger Qi Sha didn't stab him. He was perfectly fine, and looked unharmed. However, the bones that were originally hanging on his body had all disappeared, and the warm red light was slowly flowing into his body. When the thorny vines all fell, the dagger Qi Sha also fell. Suddenly, the one-armed man hugged the lady boss with one hand, and flew over with the sword in the other. Long Feiyi's lips curled into a cold arc, and protected Han Yunxi in the air. The man seemed to be in pain, but he gritted his teeth and waved his sword again, wanting to use the dagger Qi Sha to kill Gu. Long Feiyi's ruthless sword aura intercepted the dagger Qi Sha. The man immediately waved his sword again, and the dagger Qi Sha was in a deadlock between the two sword auras, hanging in the air. Long Feiyi was about to use his strength, but who knew, the dagger Qi Sha suddenly disappeared into thin air. Everyone was shocked, and the one-armed man was very confused. He looked at Gu, but still couldn't see the dagger Qi Sha. Long Fei Yi laughed in a low voice. It really is the metal of 10,000 poisons. You should have made your move earlier. Han Yunxi smiled helplessly. Everything just happened too suddenly, and she really forgot about it. She was now in the second stage of the poison storage space, and could only store poisons that were a threat to her. But if it was the metal of 10,000 poisons, there were no restrictions. She didn't even know that she had a poison storage space, and she already stored a pool of water of 10,000 poisons. So, think about it the other way around. If this dagger Qi Sha could be stored in her poison storage space, then it must be the metal of 10,000 poisons. Han Yunxi whispered, "It really is it, I finally got it." Unable to find the dagger Qi Sha, the one-armed man was already in despair. He glanced at Gu, murderous intent rising in his eyes. But before he could make a move, Long Fei Yi protected Han Yunxi and landed in front of Gu, cold eyes staring at the one-armed man. At the same time, Su Donglin, Bailey Mingxiang, and a group of shadow guard and poison guards all rushed over, surrounding the one-armed man and the lady boss. The lady boss was still smiling indifferently, and the one-armed man finally couldn't care less about Gu, realizing that he couldn't escape. "Your bones are starting to hurt, aren't they?" Han Yunxi asked slowly. The one-armed man was calm. "How can I get the antidote? Tell me what's going on," Han Yunxi said. Every bone in the one-armed man's body hurt, including his skull. His brows furrowed, and he couldn't help but fall to the ground. Even though the pain was unbearable, he still didn't let go of the lady boss. "Save me first, I'm not negotiating with you. I can't explain everything clearly in such a short time." The one-armed man finally showed an anxious expression. "It's your own business whether you have enough time or not. I don't care how much time you spend, as long as you explain everything clearly, I'll be satisfied. Naturally, I'll save you." Han Yunxi was ruthless. Although she had helped the one-armed man detoxify the poison, and the one-armed man couldn't escape from Long Fei Ye's clutches, she didn't want to be ruthless. She had to know the truth. The more the one-armed man thought about it, the more time he had to waste. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid that the person in his arms would have no one to rely on. The dagger Qi Sha is a metal of extreme yin and extreme evil. Those who die from the dagger Qi Sha are corpses of extreme yin, and their bones are of extreme yin. The red-clothed man's fate is evil, so he must have been born on the 7th day of the 7th month. His attribute is fire, and his body is of extreme evil. Using sword fire to burn the metal of extreme yin and extreme evil, and with the help of extreme yin bones, he has an extreme evil body. This method can burn away Mo Xie's evil aura, and can forge a sword that can bear Mo Xie's sword spirit. Now, the red-clothed man is not dead, the dagger Qi Sha is not fused, the extreme yin bones have been shattered, the sword fire has been extinguished, and Mo Xie's evil aura has dissipated. I also don't know where Mo Xie's sword spirit will land. The one-armed man explained. Han Yunxi was very shocked. She didn't expect that the one-armed man could see Gu's fate. She was not satisfied with the one-armed man's answer at all. "Tell me, what's Gu's situation now?" Moxie's sword spirit was currently pouring endlessly into Gu Qishao's body. Gu Qishao was a human, not a sword. Could he take it? The man was about to answer Han Yunxi, but his legs went soft and he fell heavily to the ground. The bones in his legs were in so much pain that he couldn't stand steadily. Soon, the bones in his legs would start to shatter. The lady boss was laughing, but the one-armed man had already given up on struggling. He begged bitterly, "Miss, I beg you, save me, I can't die. I promise I'll tell you everything, please believe me." Han Yunxi knew that the poison was about to take effect. She was about to save him, but Long Fei-yi. Chapter 1003. Long Fei-yi stopped Han Yunxi and asked the one-armed man coldly. What's your relationship with Tianshan Kenzo? Long Fei-yi's question had nothing to do with Immerse's sword spirit, but it was very important. Someone with such brilliant swordsmanship, if he wasn't from the Celestial Mountain Sword Sect, where did he come from? The one-armed man was surprised by Long Fei-yi's question. He hesitated, but the pain in his bones and the lady boss's laughter reminded him that he must answer Long Fei-yi's question. My master is from the Evil Sword School. He has been living in seclusion for many years and has never asked about Kenzo. I am his only disciple. The one-armed man answered honestly. Evil Sword School. Long Fei-yi was satisfied with the answer and stepped back. There were some things about the Evil Sword School that he did not know, and he had never seen some of the secret techniques of the Evil Sword School. Han Yunxi immediately took out the antidote to save the man. She wanted to ask more questions, but there was not enough time. If she did not save the man now, they would not be able to get any answers. The man took the antidote and fell to the ground. Han Yunxi could feel him sighing. Han Yunxi knew there was something going on between the man and the lady boss, but she was not interested. She only knew that the two of them had killed 7 innocent women and 2 shadow guard. Their crimes were unforgivable. After the antidote, Han Yunxi asked, why was Immerse's sword spirit absorbed by Gu's body? What is going on? Is his life in danger? The man lowered his head and said dejectedly, I don't know. The proprietress stared at Gu Qishao. Her smile had been perfectly fine, but she suddenly burst into tears. It's gone, the sword he wanted is gone, the man's head drooped down silently. No matter how Han Yunxi questioned him, he didn't say a word. Han Yunxi wanted to kick him away. You untrustworthy thing. Miss, I really don't know. I really don't know. He could see Gu's life providence, but he couldn't see through his body or his thorny vines. He felt that Gu's body was immortal and indestructible, and the vines were also immortal and indestructible. A complicated look flashed through Long Fei-yi's eyes, but he didn't say anything for a long time. At this moment, Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin suddenly shouted, Liuguang is gone. Flowing light is gone. Han Yunxi and Long Fei-yi looked back and saw that the red light had really disappeared, and the sword light that lingered around Gu had also weakened at the tip of the sword. Gradually, the sword light also disappeared. Gu seemed to have fallen asleep in midair. Shao Qi. Han Yunxi subconsciously said. She didn't even realize that she had called out Shao Qi. Su Donglin, go and take a look. Long Fei-yi said. He had to look after the one-armed man and the lady boss, or he would have gone over long ago. When Su Donglin went over, Han Yunxi wanted to follow, but Long Fei-yi stopped her. He was a little angry. If Immerse's sword soul loses control, it will be extremely lethal. You better behave yourself. Long Fei-yi knew that Han Yunxi was worried about Gu purely out of friendship, but he also minded. He had a heart that could contain the entire world, but when facing this woman alone, he couldn't accept a single grain of sand. But Shao Qi, Han Yunxi was worried. He didn't burn to death, so there shouldn't be a big problem. Long Fei-yi said. Sure enough, before Su Donglin even got close, Gu suddenly opened his eyes. Su Donglin was frightened and didn't dare to move forward. Gu, are you okay? Su Donglin asked timidly. Gu stared at him for a while, then suddenly rolled his eyes and flew towards Han Yunxi and Long Fei-yi at an extremely fast speed. Seeing this, Han Yunxi's heart that was hanging in midair finally relaxed. Gu could still be so lively, so there shouldn't be a big problem. This guy, could it be that he really kept Immerse's sword soul in his body? Why was it like this? Han Yunqi was just about to ask Gu, who knew that Gu would rush in front of Long Fei Yi and ask, Long Fei Yi, did you want to kill me just now? Long Fei Yi was high and mighty, looking down at him disdainfully, too lazy to answer. He swung his sword at Gu just now, just to cut the ropes on his body. This guy ran over to question him about this, which meant that this guy was very clear-headed during the whole process. Long Fei Yi originally didn't want to pay attention to Gu, but suddenly thought of something, and actually opened his mouth. He sneered, just now I saw you like a moth flying into a flame, and thought that you had become stupid after being tied up for so many days. Hee hee, looks like you haven't become stupid. Like a moth flying into a flame. Gu didn't understand, but Han Yunqi immediately understood Long Fei Yi's meaning. Just now when the man with the broken arm attracted the sword fire, Gu did take the initiative to throw himself at him. She saw it, but just now she was anxious, worried that Gu would be burned to death, so she didn't have time to think about it carefully. Now that she heard Long Fei Yi say this, she realized that something was wrong. Since Gu was conscious, then it was not a coincidence that he took the initiative to throw himself at the sword fire. It was not an accident, it was done with a purpose. Could it be that Gu knew something? Han Yunqi frowned and looked at Gu. She found that there was a deep wound on his shoulder. Other than that, there were some wounds caused by the sword qi. He really wasn't stabbed by the dagger. So much blood just now, should be from the deep wound on his shoulder. The more she looked at him, the more she felt that something was wrong. The more she thought about it, this guy actually had the mind to question Long Fei Yi. Could it be that he didn't care about everything that happened to him? Wasn't he curious? This was not normal. How much did this guy know about Immerse's sword spirit? The man with the broken arm wouldn't be stupid enough to tell Gu about the sword spirit. Gu most likely already knew everything. Gu! Han Yunqi suddenly shouted. Gu was shocked. He looked at Han Yunqi, and actually unconsciously retreated. In this world, it was not only Long Fei Yi who was afraid of Han Yunqi getting angry, Gu was also afraid. Why didn't you burn to death? Han Yunqi suddenly asked. Gu's face turned pale, he panicked. What did Han Yunqi mean by asking this? Did she suspect him of something? He was wrapped in the thorny vines, he wasn't injured by the sword fire. Han Yunqi should have seen it earlier. Why did she still ask this now? Gu immediately looked at Long Fei Yi, his heart filled with shock. Could it be that Long Fei Yi had told Poison Lass something? Facing Gu's questioning gaze, Long Fei Yi looked back at him with disdain, and then looked away. Long Fei Yi's attitude made Gu even more uncertain. Could it be that when he was bathed in the sword fire and sword qi, Long Fei Yi had told Poison Lass the truth about him not dying to comfort her? Gu's heart was beating wildly. He looked at Han Yunqi, suddenly not knowing how to answer. Who knew? Han Yunqi asked again. Gu, did you already know about the secret of Immerse's sword spirit? What happened to the thorny vines? How did they resist the sword fire? Han Yunqi would never have thought that Gu had an immortal body. She was angry because she thought that he suspected that Gu wasn't really kidnapped these few days, but was pretending to be kidnapped by the one-armed man. He knew about Immerse's sword spirit. He had been waiting for an opportunity, which was why he took the initiative to jump into the sword fire. Gu, did you go to the memorial hall that night? What did you see? Why didn't you come back to find us? Why didn't you come back to report that you were safe? Han Yunqi asked again. Gu's originally tense nerves suddenly relaxed. He understood Han Yunqi's anger, and he suddenly laughed out loud, laughing foolishly. You're still laughing. What's going on? Han Yunqi almost kicked him. At the side, the one-armed man was also waiting for Gu's answer. He did kidnap Gu, but he was also full of doubts about Gu's actions. Han Yunxi was so angry that her face turned white. Gu quickly explained. It turned out that he couldn't sleep that night, so he went to the memorial hall to check on the corpse, but unfortunately, he bumped into the one-armed man and the lady boss who were collecting the bones. He was almost sure that the one-armed man and the lady boss were the culprits, and he was also sure that the dagger in the lady boss's hand was the Qi Sha. He was curious about what the one-armed man and the lady boss wanted to do, so he didn't say anything, and hid in the dark. After the one-armed man and the lady boss collected the bones, they scattered lights all over the walls of the memorial hall, and set the entire memorial hall on fire. That morning, he followed the one-armed man and the lady boss to the Yin-Yang Lake, and eavesdropped on their conversation, and found out the truth. He was the person they were looking for. He purposely appeared by the lake, attracting the one-armed man's attention, and was successfully kidnapped. Then why did you jump into the sword fire? Are you looking for death? Han Yunxi persisted on this question. Even if Gu knew the truth about Immerse's sword spirit, there was no need for him to jump into the fire. Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a sneer. He wanted to see how Gu would explain. Who knew? Gu actually dug out a small root from the deep wound on his shoulder, and threw it in front of the one-armed man. Everyone recognized at a glance that this root was the root of the bramble vine. Gu explained, even if the bramble vine by the lake is cut off, I can still grow another bramble vine. The bramble vine that is grown from blood is not afraid of fire, water, and not even the sword fire. With it protecting my life, no matter what, I have to lure out Immerse's sword spirit to take a look, so as not to waste these two's efforts. The one-armed man was very surprised, and he laughed bitterly. Hee, so that's how it is. He had calculated everything extremely well, but meeting someone like Gu, it was really impossible to guard against. Han Yunxi had seen the power of Gu's bramble vine, but she didn't know much about it. She turned back to look at the Yin-Yang Lake, which had already returned to its calm state, and the bramble vine that had just fallen had already sunk into the water. She didn't think that Gu would lie to her about this kind of thing, but she didn't probe any further. However, Long Fei Ye's smile became even colder, and even more disdainful. Gu following the one-armed man and the lady boss was credible. As for the bramble vine not being afraid of water or fire, it was pure nonsense. If Long Fei Yi didn't guess wrongly, the truth should be. Chapter 1004. The matter of Gu following the one-armed man and lady boss was believable, but the matter of the bramble vines not being afraid of water or fire was pure nonsense. If Long Fei Yi did not guess wrongly, the bramble vines were just an excuse for Gu to cover up his immortal body. Gu had an immortal body, so the bramble vines that grew from his flesh should also be immortal, so it would not be destroyed by the sword fire. Just like this, Gu successfully covered up his own secret. Han Yunxi was now only concerned about why the sword spirit was absorbed by Gu's body. Then how did Immerse's sword spirit run into your body? Are you alright? Han Yunxi asked again. Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a sneer, waiting for Gu's reply. Long Fei Yi had been pondering over this matter. He thought that Gu's body was able to withstand the sword spirit. It must be because of his special physique. His undying, indestructible, and immortal body was much stronger than those ancient treasured swords. Naturally, he could withstand the moist sword spirit. Long Fei Yi suspected that there was no power in this world that Gu could not withstand. What if it was the lustbite power? Could Gu Qishao take it? What about Bai Yanqing? Long Fei Yi waited for Gu to continue talking nonsense. Who knew? Gu pretended to be confused, shrugging his shoulders. I also don't know why it's like this. Now it feels okay. As he spoke, he looked at the one-armed man, very serious and also very fierce. Hey, what's going on? If you don't say it, I will poison you to death. Gu was taking advantage of him and still acting innocent. The one-armed man was unbearably tricked by Gu. He really did not understand how this guy could withstand Immerse's sword spirit. Logically speaking, the human body cannot withstand the sword spirit. I also know why it's like this. You. The one-armed man sized up Gu. The more he looked, the more confused he became. So he's not human. Long Fei suddenly said in a cold voice. Gu immediately turned around to look at him, his gaze especially sinister. He was about to walk towards Long Fei when the lady boss, who had been silent all this while, suddenly stood up and pounced on him. Return Immerse's sword spirit to me. Return it to me. Gu immediately retreated, but the lady boss still chased after him, cursing viciously, shameless thing, return Immerse's sword spirit to me. It's mine. Mine. I'll kill you. Gu Qishao could tell that there was something wrong with the proprietress's head, but he didn't argue with her. Instead, he kept dodging and dodging, but the proprietress took out a dagger and stabbed at him again and again. Gu hid behind the one-armed man and said angrily, "Catch her, otherwise I won't be polite." The one-armed man didn't stop him, but struck the lady boss's neck with his palm, directly knocking her unconscious. The lady boss was paralyzed on the ground. The one-armed man looked at her, the heartache in his eyes was like tears, about to overflow at any time. What's going on? What right do you have to say that Immerse's sword spirit is hers? Han Yunxi asked. Even though they had found the murderer, even though Immerse's sword spirit was taken by Gu, they were still full of puzzlement about this matter. Since she's in your hands, you can do whatever you want with her. The one-armed man said indifferently. Then I can only hand you over to the magistrate, these few lives are innocent. Han Yunxi said cold. I killed them, let her go. The one-armed man said in a low voice. I believe that you killed them, but wasn't she the one who collected the bones? Didn't she have a part in setting the memorial hall on fire? Han Yunxi questioned. The one-armed man suddenly looked at Han Yunxi, his eyes full of murderous intent. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything to Han Yunxi. Why didn't you collect the bones directly after killing them, but leave behind evidence? Han Yunxi asked seriously. This was the part she couldn't understand the most. If she didn't get to the bottom of it, she wouldn't be at ease. Han Yunxi was worried that there were secrets in this matter that they didn't know, so she asked in this way. But after asking, she realized that there wasn't any big secret in this matter. The heartless lady boss was actually a sincere person. The one-armed man wasn't the lady boss's husband, but the lady boss and her husband had been good friends for many years. The lady boss's husband accidentally entered the Yinyang Lake and was sucked into the whirlpool at the bottom of the lake. When the one-armed man jumped into the water to save him, it was already too late. Although he grabbed his good friend's hand, the suction force under the whirlpool was very strong and pulled his good friend's body into pieces. The one-armed man only managed to save the lady boss's husband's hand. From then on, the lady boss's temperament changed greatly. She carved her husband's hand into a necklace and a bracelet to wear. She stubbornly believed that her husband's soul hadn't left and had been waiting at the bottom of the lake for her to reunite. The one-armed man had forgotten how many times he stopped the lady boss from jumping into the lake to commit suicide. Every time he failed to persuade the lady boss, he could only knock her out like just now. When the one-armed man jumped into the lake to save the lady boss, he discovered that Immerse's sword spirit was hidden at the bottom of the Yinyang Lake. Helpless, he could only lie to the lady boss, saying that her husband's soul had already merged with the sword spirit. As long as she could obtain Immerse's sword spirit, she could reunite with her husband. Thus, the lady boss stopped trying to commit suicide. She began to search for a way to subdue Immerse's sword spirit with the one-armed man. They learned that in order to subdue Immerse, they had to destroy the sword spirit's evil spirit and forge a treasured sword. In order to forge a treasured sword that could subdue Immerse's sword spirit, it had to be made of extremely evil gold. Thus, they spent a total of 5 years to find the 7 evil daggers. With the one-armed man's swordsmanship and the lady boss's bone-collecting technique, they could have easily destroyed the corpses. However, the sword fire needed to burn for 49 days. In order to ensure that these 49 days would go smoothly and not be disturbed, the lady boss decided to commit suicide. They wanted to borrow the power of the magistrate office to seal off the Yinyang Lake. The Yinyang Lake was originally a place that the people of Qingchuan City feared. In addition, the women who came to the lake were assassinated one after another. Moreover, they bled from their 7 orifices and died horribly. Naturally, no one dared to come to the lake again. Moreover, if the magistrate office could not solve the case, they would forbid the people from coming near the lake. They went to the memorial hall to collect the bones of the 6 women and set the memorial hall on fire. Firstly, they destroyed the corpses to hide the fact that they had collected the bones. Secondly, they used the memorial hall's fire to create rumors. They had already planned that after burning down the memorial hall, they would rob and kill the magistrate's women. Then, they would find a few witches to spread rumors that the heavenly fire would come to the Yinyang Lake. If there were any disrespectful people, they would be punished. In this way, the magistrate office would not dare to continue investigating the case. They would only send more people to guard the Yinyang Lake. At that time, when the sword fire burned, no one would dare to go near it or interfere. They planned to find the 7 women's skeletons before they started looking for the person with the fiendish life. However, they did not expect Gu to suddenly appear by the lake. The one-armed man could tell at a glance that Gu was born on the 7th day of the 7th month. His fate was fire and he was a person with the fiendish life. The 7th day of the 7th month was not a bad day. There were many people who were born on the 7th day of the 7th month. However, there were very few people who were born on this day with the fiendish life. The one-armed man immediately kidnapped Gu and put him under house arrest. In the past 2 weeks, because of the female corpses case, very few women came to the lake alone. That day, they found a woman by the lake alone. The one-armed man could tell at a glance that Sui Yun was not an ordinary woman. He also noticed that there were 2 guards hiding beside Sui Yun. He was not sure about Sui Yun's background. He was worried that Sui Yun was after Immerse's sword spirit at the bottom of the lake. Therefore, he went all out and killed Sui Yun and the 2 guards. He also asked the lady boss to take Sui Yun's bones. He planned to start forging the sword that night. However, when they killed Sui Yun, the 2 guards sent out a signal for help. Only then did they know that Sui Yun had accomplices. Helpless, the one-armed man and the lady boss could only run away and wait for the changes. Then, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi went to their shop. The lady boss did not find anything unusual. However, the one-armed man was very alert and suspected that Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were not there to sell the accessories. They were just there to test the waters. When Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi left the shop, the one-armed man immediately left with the lady boss and everyone else. The 2 of them did not go anywhere. They just hid by the Yinyang Lake and waited. When Long Fei Yi drew out Immerse's sword Qi, the lady boss could not hold back anymore. The one-armed man had no choice but to throw Gu out and fight. But who knew that Gu already knew about Immerse's sword spirit? After hearing the one-armed man's explanation, Han Yunxi's face was complicated. When she looked at the lady boss again, she did not hate her as much as before. She frowned and did not speak for a long time. Still, Long Fei and Gu Qishao remained unmoved. Long Fei's expression was as cold as ever, while Gu Qishao looked as if he had nothing to do with this old man even if the sky collapsed. Why are you so good to her? You're here for Immerse's sword spirit, right? Gu asked disdainfully. The one-armed man explained calmly, she's a girl that everyone dotes on. I can't bear for her to be alone and without anyone to rely on. This has nothing to do with Immerse's sword spirit. You can coax her or lie to her. There are plenty of reasons and excuses. Why did you choose Immerse's sword spirit? You should know that even if you take Immerse's sword spirit, she doesn't have the ability to control it. Han Yunxi finally opened her mouth. Why is your arm broken? Long Fei Yi asked. The one-armed man smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that he still couldn't deceive these people. He asked, who are you people? He looked at Long Fei Yi. Are you a disciple of Sky Mountain? Actually, if it was someone from the Jianghu who had seen Long Fei Yi's swordsmanship, they could probably guess Long Fei Yi's identity. This one-armed man did not seem to be aware of the recent happenings in the Jianghu. You haven't answered my question. Long Fei Yi retorted. The one-armed man sighed and finally admitted his selfishness. I'm training in the evil sword sect's inner chi. Although it's fast, it's easy for me to suffer from backlash and go berserk. This arm of mine is precisely because I went berserk and crippled myself. If I can't find a treasure sword that can withstand my inner chi, 3 months later, my internal injuries will relapse. My other arm. I'm afraid I won't be able to keep it. I'm a blacksmith and my master forced me to learn martial arts. I've never stepped into the Jianghu and have no intention of doing so. I just want to keep this arm. The one-armed man looked at the lady boss and lowered his voice. I just want to protect her for the rest of her life. Long Fei Yi was surprised. This guy had suffered internal injuries and he did not see it. He pulled the man's hand to check his pulse. Chapter 1005. After Long Fei Yi checked the man's pulse, he finally believed the one-armed man's words. Other than being surprised, he was also shocked. When he was learning swordsmanship, his master rarely talked about the evil sword school's swordsmanship and mental cultivation methods. He only said that it was not the right path and that seeking speed would lead to self-destruction. He only knew that the evil sword school's swordsmanship mental cultivation method was known as the evil Kenshin technique. Once it reached a certain level, there would be a backlash. As for the rest, he did not know much and was not interested. But from the looks of it, the evil sword school's swordsmanship did not lose to Tianshan Kenzo's nirvana force. If it was not for the backlash, the one-armed man's swordsmanship would be even better. He might even be able to compete with his current swordsmanship and inner strength. In other words, the flaws of the evil sword school's mental cultivation method were not unavoidable. As long as one could find a suitable treasure sword, he could avoid all the flaws and not go astray. He might even surpass Tianshan Kenzo's nirvana heart technique. The one-armed man's swordsmanship was superb. That was why he needed the help of Immerse's treasure sword spirit. If it was any other disciple of the evil sword sect, they would not need the power of Immerse's treasure sword spirit. They only needed a treasure sword that could withstand a certain amount of power. There were not many treasured swords in the world, but there were many blacksmiths. As long as there were enough materials, the blacksmiths could create a good sword. Long Fei Yi's lustbite power was much stronger than the two Kenzo's mental cultivation methods. But if one person could not support the martial arts world, then one person could not be called Jianghu. Long Fei Yi had never put the evil sword school in his eyes. Now that he thought about it, if the evil sword school could break the evil Kenshin technique, they would become Tianshan Kenzo's greatest enemy. Who is your master? Long Fei Yi asked. I just said that master is from the evil sword school, but he left the evil sword school a long time ago and stopped caring about worldly affairs. The one-armed man was implying that Long Fei Yi should not disturb his master. However, since Long Fei Yi knew about these things, there was no way he wouldn't get to the bottom of it. What's his name? Why did he forcefully teach you swordsmanship? Long Fei Yi asked again. The one-armed man fell silent. You don't have the leverage to remain silent. Are you going to speak or not? Long Fei Yi's cold tone was full of threats. However, the one-armed man remained silent. Tell me, and we'll pretend that nothing happened today. You take the lady boss and leave Qingchuan Water City. We will help you deal with the aftermath of this case. If you don't tell us. Han Yunxi looked around, there's such a big commotion here. I'm sure the people from the magistrate court are already on their way. Long Fei Yi was a threat, while Han Yunxi was a carrot and stick. However, the one-armed man said, I can't betray my master. He has already left the evil sword school and has nothing to do with the evil sword school. Let him go. I won't make things difficult for people who aren't from the evil sword school. Long Fei Yi said. How many good people were there in the evil sword school? This one-armed man was a master swordsman and was forced to be taught martial arts. Long Fei Yi felt that this matter was not simple. This man might have been used. At this time, Su Donglin said in a low voice, Master, the Shadow Guard came to report that the people from the magistrate court will be here soon. Should we block them, or? No need to block them. Ask them to come over. Long Fei Yi said. The one-armed man panicked, I'll talk. Long Fei Yi waved his hand, indicating for Su Donglin to bring people to block the officers. You don't have much time. Long Fei Yi reminded him. In other words, the one-armed man did not have the time or opportunity to lie. The one-armed man steeled his heart and told the truth, My master is the former sect leader of the evil sword school, by Shanqing. Upon hearing this name, Long Fei Yi immediately knew what was going on. There weren't many good people in the evil sword school, but this Bai Shanqing was a person worthy of respect. He had never seen him before, but he heard his master mention him. This Bai Shanqing was a mysterious person. He was gifted since he was young. Because he was adopted by the sect leader of the evil sword school, he learned the evil sword school's mantras and swordsmanship. Because the former sect leader passed away, he was promoted to the position of sect leader. When you were in power, you had many restrictions on the disciples of the evil sword school. You even talked to your Kenshin master about the two schools merging. Unfortunately, the good times did not last long. Bai Shanqing went mad during one of his closed-door training and killed dozens of disciples. Since then, he took the blame and abdicated. He went into seclusion and never appeared again. The one-armed man looked at Long Fei Yi and said seriously, Your Excellency's swordsmanship is superb. You must be a disciple of the peak of Tianshan Mountain. You must have heard of my master's name. Although my master. Long Fei Yi interrupted the one-armed man's explanation. The name Bai Shanqing was enough to explain everything. Why did he force you to learn swordsmanship? Long Fei Yi said lightly. The one-armed man said helplessly, Master said that I was gifted. As long as I had the help of a treasured sword, would be able to master the evil Kenshin technique and fulfill his final wish. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with a complicated look. It seemed that Bai Shanqing already knew the way to break the evil Kenshin technique. However, he did not return to the evil sword school. He probably did not want to cause a conflict between the two schools. Think about it. If the people of the evil sword school knew that the evil Kenshin technique could be broken, they would definitely not be willing to be under Tianshan Kenzo. They would definitely have the ambition to compete with Tianshan Kenzo for the title of martial arts master. If Tianshan Kenzo knew that the Evil Sword School had a way to break the Evil Sword School's mental cultivation technique, they would definitely be wary and even take action. This one-armed man knew nothing about the martial arts master. Even if he broke the evil Kenshin technique, he would not have the heart to step into the martial arts master. For the sake of your master, you can leave. Long Fei Yi said lightly. The one-armed man was overjoyed. He could not help but ask, "You? Who are you? Do you know my master? When you see your master, tell him that I am the disciple of the Kenzo's old man, Long Fei Yi. Ask him if he is well." Long Fei Yi said lightly. This time, the one-armed man was shocked. You are the East Qin Crown Prince." Although he did not ask about the martial arts master, the one-armed man had heard of Long Fei Yi's famous name. The one-armed man did not hesitate. He bowed to Long Fei Yi and picked up the female boss to leave. However, Han Yunqi shouted, "Don't go." The one-armed man was shocked. He thought that Long Fei Yi would regret letting him go. However, Han Yunqi said to Long Fei Yi, "Let them leave with us. Everyone, think of a way to save his arm." The one-armed man was stunned. His face was filled with disbelief. Actually, he was already surprised that Long Fei Yi would let them go for his master's sake. He never thought that a woman like Han Yunqi would say something like this. This woman had just poisoned him and warned him. Every word she said was the most vicious he had ever seen. Although Han Yunqi did not know what kind of person Bai Shanqing was and did not know why Long Fei Yi would let them go so easily. However, she knew that Long Fei Yi had a good reason for doing things. She also had a good reason for doing this. Since Han Yunqi had spoken, how could Long Fei Yi refuse? Gu Qishao had no objections. Their group immediately left the Yin-Yang Lake and returned to the female boss's shop. After the one-armed man settled the female boss down, he came to the backyard and personally served everyone tea. Gu glanced at the tea and did not touch it. Although he was not as addicted to tea as Long Fei Yi, he was still very picky when it came to tea. Just from the color of the tea, he knew that the tea was coarse. However, Long Fei Yi drank it without batting an eyelid. He did not look disgusted. Han Yunqi held the cup. She looked like she was drinking, but in fact, she did not take half a sip. She had not drunk tea for a long time. After everyone rested for a while, Han Yunqi said, "I haven't asked for your name." The one-armed man quickly stood up. "My surname is Yi and my name is Shao. This madam must be the princess of Western Qin, right? Just call me Han Yunqi," Han Yunqi said calmly. The one-armed man was filled with emotions. Since he had met this couple, what else could he do other than admit defeat? Han Yunqi did not beat around the bush. She said directly, "Yi Shao, how about we make a deal?" "I'd like to hear the details," Yi Shao said seriously. "Long Fei Yi and I will think of a way to help you keep your arm." "You have to promise me one thing," Han Yunqi said. "What is it?" Yi Shao quickly asked. "It's a secret." Han Yunqi was very serious. "From now on, you are not allowed to say a word about the Yin-Yang Lake to anyone." Yi Shao quickly replied, "Princess, don't worry. I will not say a word." Han Yunqi nodded. "I believe you." She looked at Long Fei Yi and asked, "How about I borrow your Profound Frost Sword?" The Profound Frost Sword was Tianshan Kenzo's #1 sword. Moreover, it had been trained by Long Fei Yi for many years. It had long been strengthened along with Long Fei Yi's internal energy. "You're smart." Long Fei Yi smiled. Other than Han Yunqi, no one else had touched the Profound Frost Sword since it had fallen into his hands. However, since Han Yunqi had spoken, how could he not agree? If Immerse's sword spirit had a sword body, it would definitely be stronger than the profound frost sword. However, the profound frost sword would not be that weak either. Long Fei Yi had just taken Yi Zhao's pulse and roughly estimated his internal injuries. He had a rough idea of this matter. Han Yunqi smiled. Are you going to lend it to me or not? Long Fei Yi was helpless. He said to Yi Zhao, go into seclusion with me for 3 days. Yi Zhao was overjoyed. However, he quickly became worried. Lin Gu was the lady boss. When the lady boss woke up, he did not know what she would be like. Han Yunqi narrowed her eyes and said fiercely, don't worry. I guarantee that she won't wake up before you come out of seclusion. Han Yunqi had plenty of poison to make the lady boss unconscious. Yi Zhao wanted to say something, but Han Yunqi interrupted, if you say any more nonsense, I'll pull you over. Yi Zhao had no choice but to agree. Just like this, Yi Zhao and Long Fei Yi began their seclusion for 3 days. During these 3 days, Han Yunqi and Gu did something. They helped Yi Zhao and the lady boss clean up the aftermath. They found 2 shadow guards to go to the magistrate's office to plead guilty. At the same time, they handed in a poison dagger. The poison was naturally something that Han Yunqi had rubbed on. Half of the poison masters would not be able to detect it, but Bai Yanqing would definitely recognize it. Han Yunqi's move was to guard against Bai Yanqing. If Bai Yanqing heard about the murder case in Qingchuan Water City and suspected the 7 demons' dagger, he would definitely come to investigate. Since Bai Yanqing was searching for the perplexing butterfly illusion, he would definitely know about the perplexing butterfly illusion and several catalysts that could break his immortal body. Therefore, when they searched for the fire of 10,000 poisons, they would still have to be cautious against Bai Yanqing. As for the shadow guards who went to plead guilty, they could only suffer a bit of jail time. When the limelight died down, someone would naturally come to rescue them. Han Yunqi and Gu also arranged a large sum of money for the victims' families as compensation. If the magistrate's office caught the real culprit, the families might not be able to receive compensation. There were many things that could not be done perfectly. It was impossible to distinguish between right and wrong, gains and losses. Han Yunqi told herself that it was fine as long as she did her best. 3 days later, Long Fei Yi and Yi Zhao came out of seclusion. Chapter 1006. After Long Fei Yi and Yi Zhao came out of closed-door cultivation, Long Fei Yi wanted to open the door but Yi Zhao stopped him. He took a step back and gave a deep bow. Your Highness Crown Prince, I, Yi Zhao, will remember this kindness. If you need anything in the future, Yi Zhao will be at your beck and call. It's only a transaction, keep your secret well. Long Fei Yi said. Your Highness Crown Prince, I understand the princess' kindness. This bow, please accept it on behalf of the princess. Yi Zhao said and bowed again. Actually, if Han Yunqi wanted him to keep it a secret, there were many ways. She didn't need to spend so much effort to make a deal with him and help him keep his arm. In these 3 days, not only did Long Fei Yi help him heal his internal injuries, he also made use of the profound frost sword to help him pass through a huge calamity. He had already cultivated to the 8th level of the evil Kenshin technique. Although without the aid of the sword, he was unable to continue cultivating. But the 8th level of the evil Kenshin technique was enough for him to protect himself. He had already far surpassed those expert swordsmen in the pugilistic world. Without the help of an expert like Long Fei Yi, even if he obtained Immerse's sword, he could only keep his arm. Without 1 or 2 years, he would not be able to break through to the 8th level. This kindness, how could it be repaid with just a sentence of, keep it a secret? Han Yunqi purposely used the transaction as an excuse to help him, or perhaps, she didn't want him to be too embarrassed. Actually, Han Yunxi wasn't afraid that Yi Xiao would be too embarrassed. She just didn't like to see others being deeply grateful. On this point, Long Feiyi understood her very well. Long Feiyi generously accepted Yi Xiao's thanks before opening the door and walking out. Han Yunxi and Gu were already waiting at the door. On seeing Long Feiyi come out, Han Yunxi hurriedly went up to wipe away Long Feiyi's sweat. Are you tired? In these 3 days, Long Feiyi assisted Yi Xiao in closed-door cultivation and also took time out to complete dual cultivation with Han Yunxi. It would be strange if he wasn't tired. Not tired, it went very smoothly. Long Feiyi said indifferently. He lowered his head slightly so that Han Yunxi could wipe his sweat. Gu was watching by the side and suddenly turned to look at them. But not long later, he turned back to look at Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi and looked at them and became distracted. God knows what he was thinking. Yi Xiao did not delay and hurried to look for the lady boss. Seeing that she was still unconscious, he panicked. Princess, where's the antidote? Why are you being so nice to her? You shouldn't bully your friend's wife, don't you understand? Han Yunxi said coldly. Gu, who had just reached the door and was about to enter, stopped abruptly when he heard this. Yi Xiao lowered his head and squeezed out a sentence after a while. She needs someone to take care of her right now. In other words, the lady boss's husband was no longer around, so he wasn't bullying his friend's wife. She must be crazy to accept your care. She'll only wake up half a day after taking the antidote. Han Yunxi threw down the antidote and turned to leave. Gu hurriedly escaped and jumped onto the roof. He almost didn't succeed in hiding. He sat on the roof and stared blankly at Han Yunxi's thin but carefree figure for a long time. He didn't want to think too much about what Han Yunxi had just said, but he couldn't help but think about it and link it to himself. Inside the room, Yi Xiao didn't agree with Han Yunxi's words. He muttered to himself, it's fine as long as she needs it. Yes, it is one thing to accept, it is another to need. It wasn't until Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi were about to bid farewell to Yi Xiao that Gu came down from the roof and silently stood behind Han Yunxi. Your Highness Crown Prince, my master is living in seclusion in Mount Li. In a few days, I will bring Lin Gu to Mount Li. I will definitely keep the matter of Yinyang Lake a secret, Yi Xiao said seriously. Long Feiyi only nodded and said nothing. Yi Xiao hesitated for a moment, but he still looked at Han Yunxi. Princess, there's one thing that this one doesn't understand. I hope you can enlighten me. What is it? Han Yunxi asked. How did Princess know that Sui Yun's corpse was hidden in the lake? Yi Xiao asked curiously. If it weren't for the discovery of Sui Yun's corpse, these two probably wouldn't have thought of the matter of the gathering bones. It's a secret. Han Yunxi definitely wouldn't reveal the true secret of the Seven Fiends' dagger. Unexpectedly, Yi Xiao said, since Princess won't say, then you can be at ease. This one won't reveal any secrets. After Yi Xiao finished speaking, he bowed to Han Yunxi with his hands clasped. He retreated into the room and slowly closed the door. Han Yunxi was stunned at first, but then she smiled. Yi Xiao wasn't stupid. He could tell that she wanted to help them. If that was the case, then wouldn't this trip count as making a friend? Han Yunxi felt that it was better to forget each other in the Jianghu. She didn't know that her kindness today would bring her great help in the future. Looking at the tightly shut door of true love, Han Yunxi sighed softly. She could only pretend that this matter was over. She said to Long Feiyi, let's go. We still have business to attend to. After they returned to the inn, Han Yunxi immediately took out the Seven Fiends' dagger and the perplexing butterfly illusion at the same time. Just like with the previous poisons, when she dripped a drop of perplexing butterfly illusion onto the Seven Fiends' dagger, the sturdy dagger was gradually corroded by the perplexing butterfly illusion. It sizzled and emitted a white smoke. When the white smoke dissipated, the originally long dagger had actually been corroded into a small red teardrop the size of a teardrop. If it was before, Han Yunxi would have tried mixing the poisonous teardrops in her possession to see what would happen. But now, she directly collected the poisonous teardrops from the perplexing butterfly illusion and the gold of 10,000 poisons and stored them in a special bottle. Now that she knew the true secret of the perplexing butterfly illusion, she didn't have to waste so much effort in conducting so many experiments. Now, she had the water, earth, wood, and gold of 10,000 poisons in her possession. She had also obtained the corpse blood and beauty's blood. Now, she had 6 blood teardrops in her possession. Only the fire of 10,000 poisons, poison goo blood, and poison beast blood were left. The poison goo blood and poison beast blood were with Bai Yanqing. Therefore, their next biggest mission was to find the fire of 10,000 poisons. It had to be said that this trip to Qingchuan Water City had gone much smoother than Han Yunxi and the others had imagined. They had originally thought that it would be delayed until after the new year. Who would have thought that they would be able to settle the matter in less than 10 days after arriving at Qingchuan Water City? Seeing Han Yunxi put the gold of 10,000 poisons into her poison storage space, Long Fei Yi and Gu finally relaxed. This matter could finally be considered completely settled. Long Fei Yi raised his eyebrows and looked at Gu. He said coldly, "Why don't you show me a few moves?" Gu played dumb. What? Long Fei Yi's gaze immediately turned cold. Gu had no choice but to do as he was told. Who asked Long Fei Yi to have something on him? Long Fei Yi must have guessed the truth about the thorny vines. Long Fei Yi must also know the reason why he was able to subdue Mo Xie's sword spirit. Han Yunxi, however, knew nothing about it. She was curious as to what effect Mo Xie's sword spirit would have on Gu's swordsmanship. Gu went to the courtyard and pulled out his sword. Just as he swung his sword, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi immediately saw a faint white shadow on his sword. "What's that?" Han Yunxi asked, puzzled. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He struck out with his palm and immediately broke Gu's sword. Gu's sword fell to the ground and Han Yunxi immediately saw the white shadow clearly. That white shadow was a sword that had a shape but no substance. "That's the sword spirit?" Han Yunxi asked. Long Fei Yi replied indifferently. Gu simply threw away the broken sword's hilt. He held a white sword shadow and waved it around. Although this sword shadow had a shape but no substance, the sword aura didn't lose to Gu's sword at all. Moreover, it could cut through iron like it was mud. In just 2 or 3 moves, it chopped down a tree in the courtyard. Han Yunxi watched in disbelief. She couldn't imagine how strong Mo Xie's sword would be if it could be forged into a treasured sword that could withstand this sword spirit. As soon as Gu Qishao withdrew his sword, it vanished without a trace. He walked towards Han Yunxi and smiled, "Poison lass, wait for me to forge a sword, then I'll give Mo Xie to you." Before Han Yunxi could speak, Long Fei Yi said coldly, "Mo Xie will be sent to you first." Gu pretended to be a hostage. In fact, he wanted to obtain Mo Xie's sword spirit and give it to Han Yunxi as a gift. How could Long Fei Yi not see through him? No, this thing is too evil. I don't like it. Han Yunxi rejected. She said, "Gu, next time something like this happens, please don't act alone, okay?" "Okay." Gu readily agreed. He knew that Han Yunxi was worried about him, so he didn't explain. Gu thought to himself, once the sword is forged, I'll find a reason to give it to Han Yunxi. Maybe she'll want it then. He didn't know that Long Fei Yi had already set his sights on the Ganjiang treasured sword on Heaven Mountain. Ganjiang and Mo Xie were a pair, after all. Han Yunxi really didn't have much interest in swords. She asked, "Rest for a day, then we'll return to three-way black market tomorrow. Including the time they spent heading south, they'd been gone for almost a month. If they returned, they'd have to spend another half a month. Yesterday, Long Fei had just received Gu Beiyue's secret letter. Myriad Merchant Hall and East Origin Hall were doing well. Tiger's prison was also very peaceful. Bai Yuqiao was doing his best to take care of Ning Jing and the others. As for the battlefield, Northern Li's civil war had completely erupted. Zhu Nixia went north, and so did the southern forces of Northern Li. Furthermore, Zhu Nixia had already arranged for the third batch of warhorses from the retreating Winter Crow country, as well as his cavalry. Gu Beiyue estimated that in half a month's time, the third batch of warhorses would be sent to the battlefield. This cavalry would move from west to east, joining forces with Zhu Nixia and the southern forces to besiege the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Although the battle was progressing faster and more fiercely than they'd imagined, everything was still under Long Fei's control. Zhu Nixia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors were still evenly matched. Zhu Nixia was surrounded from all sides, and the Northern Dynasty's emperors weren't willing to be outdone. Apart from dividing their forces to defend, they also concentrated an elite force to face Zhu Nixia head-on. Long Fei had also received news from noble consort Xiao yesterday and learned a lot about the battle. The information that Ning Jing had asked Bai Yuqiao to inquire about, Gu Beiyue's personal observation, and noble consort Zhao's report were basically the same. In the next month or two, Zhu Nixia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors would gradually reveal all of their forces. Long Fei predicted that the true battle between the two sides would only break out in the 12th month at the earliest. Although the civil war had broken out, it was still just a small skirmish. And for both sides to suffer heavy losses, it would be spring at the earliest. Thus, even if they returned now, they still wouldn't be able to save Ning Jing and Mu Ling. Once they made a move, Zhu Nixia, that paranoid fellow, would definitely suspect something. At the very least, he would suspect Ning Qing. Then, Ning Qing would be in great danger. Long Fei said, "There's still at least 2 months before we go back. Let's go back and find out where the fire of 10,000 poisons is." Mo said, "There was a bug in yesterday's update. The bug with the one-armed man, you know." Chapter 1007. Although they were looking for the metal of 10,000 poisons earlier than planned, Han Yunxi and the others still couldn't make it back in time to save Mu Ling, and the others. In order to keep Zhu Nixia in check, they could only wait. The Ning clan troops also had another important task, taming those 30,000 horses. Long Fei had never asked about the horses, but Han Yunxi had enough authority to do so. She'd asked twice since leaving three-way black market. Deputy General Xue had already taken care of the horse trainers Zhu Nixia had sent and would soon begin taming the horses. There was another important matter, and that was Bai Yanqing. It was often said that no news was good news, but this saying didn't apply to Bai Yanqing. Just because there was no news from Bai Yanqing didn't mean he wasn't making a move. Han Yunxi and Long Fei couldn't figure out what Bai Yanqing was planning. If he was trying to drive a wedge between Eastern and Western Qin before, what was he up to now? Why did Bai Yanqing hate Eastern and Western Qin so much? There were too many suspicious points about Bai Yanqing, just like the mysterious person in the poison sect's forbidden grounds. Han Yunxi and Long Fei had no clue what to do, but they couldn't ignore or forget about him. They couldn't guard against Bai Yanqing, so they could only find the fire of 10,000 poisons as soon as possible. With Gu around, Long Fei wouldn't mind luring Bai Yanqing out for a good fight once they found the fire of 10,000 poisons. Alright, then let's wait a little longer, Han Yunxi agreed with Long Fei's plan. Gu seemed to be in a daze and didn't express his opinion. It wasn't until Long Fei glanced at him that he came to his senses. Alright, no problem. Actually, he really didn't hear what Long Fei said just now, so he just casually agreed. Do you have any news about the fire of 10,000 poisons? Long Fei asked again. There's no news at all. Gu didn't start looking for it recently. He had been looking for it since a year ago. Unfortunately, there was no news at all. In fact, if he hadn't heard of the Seven Evils dagger, they probably wouldn't have found the gold of 10,000 poisons this time. Long Fei had also sent the Shadow Guard to investigate, but the results were the same as Gu's. Is the fire of 10,000 poisons a flame? Or is it some other form of heat? Han Yunxi asked in confusion. She couldn't figure out how the fire of 10,000 poisons could exist in such a form. For example, the fire in the five elements was not just a flame, but a general term for heat energy. Gu shook his head. He had some ideas about the previous four poisons, but he had no clue about the fire of 10,000 poisons. Was the fire of 10,000 poisons an earthly fire, a heavenly fire, or a furnace fire? Was it a flame that had always been burning, or a flame that had yet to be ignited? If it was a flame that had always been burning, then it would be easy to find it. If it wasn't a flame that had yet to be ignited, or if it wasn't an open flame, then it would be really difficult to find it. Let's rest for a few days and think about it carefully. It was rare for Gu to be so serious. Okay. Han Yunxi was also serious. In this way, Han Yunxi and the others settled down in Qingchuan Water City. They inquired about the fire of 10,000 poisons, paid attention to the situation in Northernly, and also inquired about Bai Yanqing's whereabouts. On this day, Han Yunxi suddenly received a letter from the medicine hut. After reading the letter, she immediately ran to Long Fei in the courtyard excitedly. Long Fei, good news. I have good news. Han Yunxi looked so excited that it was as if she had found the whereabouts of the fire of 10,000 poisons. Before Long Fei could ask, Gu Qishao jumped down from the roof with a grin. Poison lass, what's the good news to make you so happy? Our Dr. Gu can be saved. Han Yunxi was really happy, even happier than when she had found the fire of 10,000 poisons. Really? Where did this news come from? Long Fei was also excited. He had asked many people to find the dragon pill, so he really couldn't guess who had delivered the good news. Who found the medicine? You're even faster than me. You're quite capable. Gu was also smiling. However, Han Yunxi's next words made him instantly freeze. Han Yunxi said, Old man of alchemy. He didn't find the dragon pill, but he obtained the prescription to refine the dragon pill. He has also found a few ingredients, and he's only missing one thing. He needs our help to deliver it. Gu's smile instantly froze on his face. Long Fei quickly asked, What is it? Wine. To refine the dragon pill, we need snow wine that has been aged for 100 years. Han Yunxi smiled. This thing. Ning Qing should have it. The so-called snow wine was wine brewed using snow water as water. Snow that had been accumulated for more than 10 years was melted into water. After it had settled, the top layer of water was used to brew wine. This was ordinary snow wine. As for 100-year-old snow wine, not only did it require the melted snow of more than 100 years to brew, it also had to be sealed for more than 100 years. Many 100-year-old wines on the market were actually fake. It was really difficult to find a bottle of genuine 100-year-old wine. Needless to say, snow wine. To drink good tea, look for Long Fei. To take good medicine, look for Gu. To drink good wine, look for Ning Qing. Su Donglin, write a letter to Myriad Merchant Hall and ask. Long Fei immediately ordered. Other than Han Yunxi's matter, he had rarely been so agitated. Su Donglin, while you're at it, tell this news to Gu Beiyue." Han Yunxi quickly added. She was already looking forward to seeing Gu Beiyue's shadow art again. The white-clothed gentleman of the past was about to return. If the little thing knew this good news, it would definitely be very happy. Yes, this subordinate will do it right away. Su Donglin was also excited. Once Gu Beiyue recovered, His Highness and the princess would have another helping hand. After Su Donglin left, Han Yunxi turned around and realized that Gu had disappeared. "Where is he?" Han Yunxi asked suspiciously. Long Fei Yi didn't notice Gu slip away just now. He glanced at the roof, but didn't see Gu's figure. Han Yunxi then remembered something. She muttered, "Could it be?" Long Fei Yi immediately understood what Han Yunxi was talking about. He only said 2 words, "Let him be." Han Yunxi remembered nothing else but the matter of the old man of alchemy asking her to find a disciple. The old man of alchemy said that if Han Yunxi could help him find a disciple, he would give the entire alchemy furnace to Han Yunxi. Back then, there was an agreement in black and white. Han Yunxi had kept the contract with her all this time. At that time, Han Yunxi suspected that the little madman that the old man of alchemy was looking for was Gu. She tried to sound him out twice, but Gu avoided her both times. She didn't try again. She wouldn't force Gu to do anything for the sake of an alchemy furnace. 3 days later, Han Yunxi received a reply from Myriad Merchant Hall's first elder. Ning Cheng's wine cellar did indeed have 100-year-old snow wine. Moreover, it wasn't just 1 jar, but 3 jars. Although they couldn't get Ning Cheng's consent, both Han Yunxi and the first elder decided to act first and report later. When Han Yunxi told the old man of alchemy about the 100-year-old snow wine and was about to arrange for someone to deliver it, the old man of alchemy sent a letter with an unexpected request. The old man of alchemy wanted Han Yunxi to stay in the alchemy furnace for 3 years to serve as great alchemy furnace. Otherwise, not only would he not know how to refine pills, he would also destroy the pill recipe. At this time, everyone remembered the rules of the medicine requesting cave. It was never easy to obtain medicine from the medicine requesting cave. Damn it! Han Yunxi's good mood completely disappeared. When she begged the old man of alchemy to find the dragon pill, she seriously asked for the conditions again and again. That old madman was easy to negotiate. He said that old friends didn't need to be so particular. He even said that he would do his best to help them find the medicinal pills. Long Fei Yi didn't feel at ease and had her write another letter to clearly state the conditions. In the end, the old man of alchemy made 2 requests. The first was for Han Yunxi to thoroughly investigate the effects of the dragon pill. The second was for Han Yunxi to take a few of her precious poisons. Although there was no contract between them, Han Yunxi still kept all the letters they'd exchanged in the past. She knew that the alchemy hut old man had a strange temperament and was temperamental. However, temper wasn't an excuse to go back on his word. Who would have thought that the old madman would make such an unreasonable request and want her to serve the great alchemy furnace? Could it be that the old madman still held a grudge against her for threatening to destroy the great alchemy furnace in the medicine requesting cave? Don't even think about it. Long Fei Yi said. When they went to ask for medicine back then, they were still afraid of the power of Medicine Hut and Medicine City. But now, in the eyes of Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, Medicine City and Medicine Hut were no longer unshakable. Medical City had long been under the control of Gu Beiyue. In the past 2 years, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had joined forces with the Medicine Ghost Valley to cultivate some real power in Medicine City. They no longer had to rely on Medicine City in the medicinal market. Su Donglin, tell the old man of alchemy that we've already agreed on the conditions for him to find the medicine. If he comes back with any more requests, it'll be blackmail. There's a price to pay for blackmailing this princess. Tell him to refine the medicinal pills within 10 days, or else. Han Yunshi was pondering how to threaten the old man of alchemy in a way that would have deterrence when Long Feiyi bluntly said, or else, this prince will personally destroy his alchemy furnace. Long Feiyi's threat directly hit the old man of alchemy's vital point. Yes. Su Donglin obeyed and left. Gu sat on the roof and looked at them with raised brows, not saying a word. Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi soon received a reply from the old man of alchemy. The old man of alchemy replied with 2 words, no way. Long Feiyi had never received such a simple yet provocative letter in his life. Han Yunshi looked at the 2 large words in the letter and was a bit stunned. She knew that they would have to personally make a trip to the alchemy furnace. Long Feiyi coldly said, Su Donglin, bring brush and ink. Su Donglin quickly brought over the brush and ink. Long Feiyi raised the brush and wrote 2 words, seeking death. After the letter was sent out, Long Feiyi immediately gave the order, prepare the carriage. We're going to the medicinal hut. He looked at Gu and Gu immediately jumped off the roof with an indifferent expression. He laughed and said, I haven't been to Medicine City in a long time. I miss the medicinal fragrance there. Long Feiyi's face was cold as he said in a low voice, the old man from the medicinal hut didn't keep his word first. It's best if you don't interfere in this matter. A complicated look flashed in Gu's eyes, but he continued to play dumb. What does it have to do with this elder? For Gu Beiyue's sake, this elder will go with you. We've already agreed that this elder will go to the medicinal hut. The medicine requesting cave is too smelly, this elder won't go in. Chapter 1008. It was also good that Gu didn't enter the medicine requesting cave. Han Yunshi glanced at him but didn't say anything. She only acted as if she didn't understand anything. She only knew that no matter what, they were not in the wrong on this trip to the medicine hut. Even if they really had to make a move, they had to bring back the dragon pill. On the same day, Han Yunshi's group left Qingchuan Water City and secretly headed in the direction of Medicine City. Gu didn't say anything and led the way on horseback as usual. Moreover, he specially chose a shortcut from Qingchuan Water City to Medicine City. It only took a little more than 10 days. Along the way, Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi were still very busy. Almost every day, they received letters from different places that required their attention. Every night, no matter how busy they would still take time out to dual cultivate. Bailey Mingxiang also didn't idle around. He practiced martial arts seriously and often sought out Su Donglin for guidance. Gu didn't care about anything else. He was only responsible for inquiring about the fire of 10,000 poisons. They headed northwest. Time was like the axle of a carriage, constantly moving day and night. At this time, Ning Jing's belly was almost 7 months old. No matter how loose her clothes were, they couldn't hide it. When she was 5 or 6 months pregnant, it didn't seem to be that big. However, when she was 7 months pregnant, her belly suddenly swelled up like a balloon. Ning Jing clearly felt that it was becoming more and more inconvenient for her to move around. She also found it harder and harder to sleep at night. The maids and guards in the courtyard were all by Yu Qiao's people. Whatever Ning Jing needed, she could use Mu Ling as an excuse to send it in. Now, it seemed that everything was still relatively safe. In Tiger's prison, Su Xiaoyu lived in the small courtyard. Ning Jing, Mu Ling and Deacon Jean lived in the large courtyard. Mu Ling had once asked Bai Yuqiao to arrange for Su Xiaoyu to live in the large courtyard and drive Deacon Jean and Uncle Qing to the small courtyard. After all, it was inconvenient for men and women to live together. Moreover, Ning Jing's pregnancy had always been hidden from Deacon Jean and Uncle Qing. However, Bai Yuqiao didn't agree. Although most of the things in Tiger's prison were arranged by her, she still had to guard against Jun Yixia's suspicions. She knew how suspicious Jun Yixia was more than anyone else. It was actually not easy to hide Ning Jing's pregnancy until now. Ning Jing still needed 3 months to give birth. If everything went well, Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi would come to save people in about a month and a half, according to Ning Cheng's promise before. With her cooperation from the inside and Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi's ability, it was not difficult to save a few people from Tiger's prison. Bai Yuqiao was most afraid that Ning Jing would give birth prematurely. When the child was in the belly, everything was easy to hide. However, once the child was born, Jun Yixia would definitely send people to take the child away. At that time, it would be troublesome. In addition to taking care of Ning Jing and the others, Bai Yuqiao went to the small courtyard to see Su Xiaoyu every day. Her attitude towards Su Xiaoyu was still the same as before. She threatened and panicked from time to time, but she never really did anything to her. No one knew how much she was afraid that Su Xiaoyu would know the truth. Su Xiaoyu didn't understand anything. She only thought that Ning Qing was protecting her. Bai Yuqiao took care of everyone in Tiger's prison, but she also paid attention to the situation of Northern Li's civil war and her senior brother's safety. Every night, she sat alone on Su Xiaoyu's roof and read the letters sent from the battlefield. She was conflicted in her heart. She couldn't make a choice and had mixed feelings. She had no choice but to taste all kinds of pain herself. She had grown up and followed her master for so many years. Even if she had suffered great grievances, she had never thought of a question: who were her parents and whether they were still alive. However, these few nights, she couldn't help but think about them. She couldn't help but yearn for a warm embrace. Did little Yu ever think of her parents and home? Bai Yuqiao wasn't the only one who couldn't sleep in the quiet night. Ning Jing tossed and turned on the bed. With her big belly, she felt uncomfortable no matter how she laid down. She was always afraid that she would squash the child in her belly. Her longing for Tangli didn't fade with time. Instead, it grew stronger, especially in the middle of the night. She always wanted to know what Tangli was doing. She always missed the bowl of red bean porridge that Tangli personally cooked. Mu Ling was also awake. She slept on the warm bed on the right side of Ning Jing's bed and personally kept watch for Ning Jing. When she heard Ning Jing tossing and turning, she said, "Sister Jing, you can't sleep again. Why aren't you asleep yet?" Ning Jing was very surprised. Mu Ling didn't move just now, so she thought that the girl was asleep. "I miss Chi brother." Mu Ling was always so simple and pure. She said whatever was on her mind, and her happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy were all written on her face. "He doesn't miss you. Why do you miss him?" Ning Jing asked seriously. She had never had a good impression of Gu. Mu Ling unconsciously stroked her flat belly and muttered, "Sister Jing, I've been pretending for too long. I've almost been fooled by myself. I've dreamed so many times that I'm really pregnant with Chi brother's child." She had been wearing a fake belly for so long. If she hadn't taken it off when she slept, she would have really thought that she was pregnant. After acting for so long, it was easy to get into character. Ning Jing was stunned at first, but then she burst out laughing. "Mu Ling you're still so young and you're already having wet dreams." Mu Ling panicked and sat up immediately. I didn't. "Then how did you really get pregnant with Goose child?" Ning Jing asked. It's. Mu Ling blushed. "I dreamed that Chi brother touched my belly and smiled at me. He looked really good when he smiled." If Gu knew about Mu Ling's dream, would he still be able to smile? Ning Jing did laugh. She didn't know what to say about Mu Ling Er. This girl was both funny and pitiful. Why did Gu not care about her? Mu Ling Er looked at Ning Jing's smile and didn't say anything. There was a hint of hesitation in her big clear eyes. When Ning Jing stopped, she got off the bed and nestled beside Ning Jing. Sister Jing, can I ask you a question? Mu Ling Er asked in a low voice. Go ahead. Ning Jing was very suspicious. This girl was so close to her. What did she want to say? Unexpectedly, Mu Ling Er asked, Sister Jing, Tang Li must have kissed you before, right? Ning Jing was silent for a moment. Then she quickly lifted the blanket and chased Mu Ling Er off the bed. I'm going to sleep. Little girl, don't ask so many questions. Sister Jing, how does it feel to be kissed? I dreamt that Chi brother kissed me, Mu Ling Er said anxiously. Luckily, the room was very dark. Otherwise, the blushing Ning Jing would have burrowed under the blanket. Although she had tormented Tang Li before and had also been tormented by Tang Li in various ways, she still felt very uncomfortable when discussing the topic of kissing with outsiders. Go down, go down. I'm going to sleep. Don't disturb me. Ning Jing said unhappily. I'll just ask secretly. I promise I won't tell anyone, okay? Mu Ling Er pleaded in a low voice. You can ask your sister when you see her. Ning Jing pushed the problem to Han Yunxi. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling Er said timidly, I don't dare to ask her. Long Fei Yi is too scary. You're asking her, not Long Fei Yi. Ning Jing couldn't help but roll her eyes. But this has something to do with Long Fei Yi. Anyway, it's too scary. I won't ask. Mu Ling Er said seriously. If Ning Jing wasn't pregnant, she would have kicked Mu Ling Er off the bed. It wasn't easy to ask about Long Fei Yi, but it was easy to ask about Tang Li. What was this little girl thinking? Mu Ling Er begged twice more, but Ning Jing still didn't want to talk to her. Mu Ling had no choice but to get off the bed dejectedly. Ning Jing wasn't sleepy to begin with. Because Mu Ling Er brought up this topic, she couldn't calm down. She couldn't help but think about the times when Tang Li kissed her. Tang Li begged her relentlessly every time, but in the end, he always forced himself on her. Thinking about this, Ning Jing couldn't help but smile. She didn't dare to move around, afraid that Mu Ling would know that she wasn't asleep and come over to harass her again. Mu Ling waited for a long time. Seeing that Ning Jing didn't move, she really thought that Ning Jing was asleep. She wasn't sleepy to begin with. Now that the topic was brought up, she was even more upset and couldn't sleep. She got off the bed and went out to get some fresh air. Ning Jing only heaved a sigh of relief when Mu Ling closed the door. In the dark, she didn't see that Mu Ling had left her fake belly on the bed. Mu Ling was full of thoughts and didn't notice that she wasn't wearing her fake belly. After she went out, she walked straight ahead. She and Ning Jing lived in the backyard, while Deacon Jean and Uncle Ching lived in the front yard. There was a small garden in between. Mu Ling was strolling among the flowers. She was so bored that she kicked a small stone. Suddenly, a stone flew out from the right and knocked away the small stone she kicked out. Who's there? Mu Ling shouted sternly. She turned her head to look, but she didn't see anyone. She became alert and was about to walk forward. Unexpectedly, someone pressed down on her shoulder from behind. Mu Ling immediately squatted down and swept her leg out. The person behind her jumped up and kicked her fiercely. Mu Ling had no way to retreat and could only lean back to avoid it. Who knew that the moment she leaned back, the man would step on her, forcing her to lie on the ground while the man stepped on her lower abdomen. At this moment, Mu Ling finally saw who it was. It was none other than Deacon Jean. Mu Ling, where's your child? Deacon Jean asked coldly. Only then did Mu Ling realize that she didn't wear a fake belly. She felt a chill down her spine and broke out in a cold sweat. She felt like she was about to collapse. Deacon Jean stared at her flat lower abdomen and stepped on it forcefully. Mu Ling couldn't help but cry out, "It hurts. It hurts." Deacon Jean immediately let go of her and hurriedly squatted down to cover her mouth. "Shut up if you don't want to attract Uncle Ching." Mu Ling immediately shut up obediently. However, in the next moment, she couldn't help but scream. Because Deacon Jean had pressed his hand on her lower abdomen. Fortunately, Deacon Jin's other hand was covering Mu Ling's mouth to block out her scream. Otherwise, not only Uncle Ching, but everyone in the courtyard would have been woken up. Mu Ling's eyes widened. She used both hands to tug at Deacon Jin's hand and wriggled her body as hard as she could to struggle. Deacon Jean covered her mouth with one hand and pressed her stomach with the other to check. He didn't have any extra hands to restrain her, so he simply sat down on Mu Ling's lap. Chapter 1009. Deep in the night, the moon was like a hook. The posture of Deacon Jean and Mu Ling in the flower bed really made one's imagination run wild. However, neither of them realized that there was anything wrong with each other's posture. Deacon Jean pressed Mu Ling's flat stomach and finally confirmed that this woman wasn't pregnant at all. And Mu Ling was so frightened that she couldn't think straight. God, she had been discovered. What should she do? Your pregnancy is fake. Deacon Jean stared at Mu Ling with a particularly serious gaze. Mu Ling had already given up struggling. She turned her head away and wanted to cry. She just got herself into trouble again, big trouble. Ning Jing had said that Uncle Ching had always been dissatisfied with the D clan's loyalty to the Western Qin royal family, and Deacon Jean wanted to regain his freedom. These two people couldn't be completely trusted. Since the pregnancy had been kept a secret, it had to be kept a secret until the end. Seeing that Mu Ling didn't answer, Deacon Jean growled, "Tell me." This growl was a little angry and anxious. Mu Ling didn't hear Deacon Jin's anxiety. She only knew that he was very angry. She thought that there wasn't a day when she didn't lie to Deacon Jean all the way from Three-Way Black Market to Northern Lee Sky River City. Although this guy's attitude wasn't good, he basically fulfilled all her requests. Whatever she wanted to eat, drink, or use, as long as she asked, he could do it no matter how difficult it was. Now that he knew that her pregnancy was fake, he must know that all her requests along the way were fake. Even Mu Ling felt that she wasn't lying, but playing with him. Deacon Jean leaned over, his fine bangs hanging down. From this angle, Mu Ling could finally see this guy's eyes clearly. She suddenly realized that the color in Deacon Jin's eyes wasn't anger, but she couldn't explain it, but no man had ever stared at her like that before. She couldn't help but look at it seriously. Gradually, she had a feeling that she was Deacon Jin's prey. Yes, prey. Deacon Jean was like a cheetah lurking in the dark. He had caught her and was scrutinizing her, ready to devour her at any moment. Mu Ling finally sobered up. She threw a punch at Deacon Jean. "Let go of me, hooligan." Her embroidered fist was immediately covered by Deacon Jin's large palm. Her other hand was about to strike, but Deacon Jean immediately held it down. Mu Linger's gaze slowly moved down from Deacon Jin's face. She finally discovered that this man was lying on top of her. "Aw!" Mu Ling screamed. Deacon Jean had no choice but to let go of her hand and cover her mouth. Mu Linger struggled with all her strength, kicking and scratching. Deacon Jean covered her mouth with one hand and pressed down on her shoulder with the other, preventing her from getting up. "Be quiet. If you attract other people over, I won't care about you," Deacon Jean warned in a cold voice. These words were like a curse, instantly freezing Mu Linger. That's right. If she attracted Uncle Ching over, or the guards guarding outside the courtyard, then her fake pregnancy would be completely exposed. Mu Linger didn't dare to move again. Only then did Deacon Jean release her mouth. Mu Linger lowered her eyes and looked at the two bodies pressed together. She didn't dare to say anything and used her hands to signal for Deacon Jean to get off her body. Deacon Jean immediately got up. Only then did Mu Linger exhale and stand up. But who knew that before she could stand firm, Deacon Jean suddenly pulled her and hurriedly fell backwards. Mu Linger completely lost her center of gravity. Her entire body was pulled down and fell onto Deacon Jean's body. Their noses were facing each other, and the distance between their lips could be said to be very close. Mu Linger was shocked. Before she could finish her sentence, Deacon Jean reached out and pressed the back of her head, pressing her down. At this moment, the two lips met. All of Mu Linger's words and all of her shock were stopped at Deacon Jean's lips. Mu Linger's mind went blank. She only felt that her lips were slightly soft and moist. She couldn't describe the feeling. Was this the feeling of kissing? Before Mu Linger could understand what this feeling was, Deacon Jean suddenly turned his face to the side. Mu Linger buried her head in his neck. She froze. She was so stiff that she didn't dare to move. Her lips were still slightly open. Someone is coming from the front. It should be Uncle Ching. You'd better behave, Deacon Jean said in a low voice. Uncle Ching. Mu Linger was flustered, at a loss, and trembling with fear. She reflexively wanted to get up, but Deacon Jean pressed her back and said coldly, "Don't move." Mu Linger was frightened. She lay on Deacon Jean's body and didn't dare to move again. Just like that, the two of them quietly hid in the flower bed. After a while, Mu Linger also heard footsteps and walked over step by step. Her heart immediately raced, and her body trembled a little. Deacon Jean frowned. His expression was solemn as he hugged Mu Linger tightly with both hands, telling her not to be so nervous. The footsteps suddenly stopped, but quickly went to the right. After a few steps, they couldn't hear any movement. After waiting for a while, Mu Linger still didn't hear any footsteps. However, she didn't dare to act rashly anymore. After a while, there were still no footsteps. Mu Linger relaxed a little. She lowered her voice and asked Deacon Jean in his ear, "Uncle Ching, have they left?" Deacon Jean, who had been rather calm all this time, was clearly stunned for a moment. However, he quickly recovered and said in a low voice, "I'm not sure. Don't make a sound first." Mu Linger was very obedient. She continued to bury her head in Deacon Jin's neck. Time passed little by little. Unconsciously, Mu Linger relaxed and was no longer so nervous. She gradually realized that she was lying on a man's body and was being hugged by his arms. She couldn't help but think of the kiss just now. Although she didn't know if it was considered a kiss. Gradually, she began to feel uneasy, awkward, and uncomfortable. Ever since she was young, other than being hugged by Chi brother once or twice, she had never been hugged by a man other than her father. She couldn't tell what the difference was. She just felt that the feeling of being hugged by Deacon Jean was different from being hugged by Chi brother. Why was it like this? Was it because Chi brother only hugged her for a while and then let go? He had never hugged her for so long and so tightly. She could feel the firmness and warmth of Deacon Jin's body. The more Mu Linger thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. It shouldn't be like this. However, she had no choice. She could only blame herself for being too careless when she went out tonight. Why did she go out all of a sudden? If she didn't go out and had a good night's sleep, this wouldn't have happened. Mu Linger began to feel uneasy. Deacon Jin, on the other hand, looked up at the starry sky. She didn't know what he was thinking. His usually cold and emotionless eyes were a little dazed and absent-minded. She waited and waited. Finally, Mu Linger couldn't help but ask, "Has Uncle Ching left?" Uncle Ching had actually left a long time ago. Deacon Jin didn't answer her. Instead, he asked indifferently, "Mu Linger, why did you lie? Why did you use your innocence to fool me? Was it fun?" Mu Linger remained silent. "Answer me." Deacon Jin's tone was still very indifferent. However, if Mu Linger raised her head to look at Deacon Jin at this moment, she would definitely see the seriousness and persistence in his eyes. Mu Linger realized that Uncle Ching had left. She wanted to get up, but Deacon Jin's hands around her waist suddenly tightened, confining her so that she couldn't move. "Answer me," he said coldly. "It's fun. There's no why. Let go of me. Don't you know that men and women shouldn't touch each other? You're bullying women." Mu Linger raised her head and glared at Deacon Jin. She secretly thought that she had to help Ning Jing keep her secret no matter what. Unfortunately, she had underestimated Deacon Jin's intelligence. The one who's pregnant is Ning Jing, right? Ning Jing is pregnant with Tang Li's child. Deacon Jin asked. Mu Linger was shocked. "You? What do you want?" Unexpectedly, Deacon Jin scolded angrily, "What do you think your reputation is? You're going to ruin it like this? What did your parents teach you? Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to get married in the future?" Mu Linger was stunned for a moment, but she immediately replied seriously, "Anyway, I'm only going to marry Chi brother. I'm not afraid." "You?" Deacon Jin was exasperated. "Let go of me. Hurry up." Mu Linger said angrily. Deacon Jin suddenly stopped talking and simply let go of Mu Linger. Mu Linger, on the other hand, stopped moving and looked at him in a daze. Deacon Jin directly pushed Mu Linger off his body and stood up to leave. Mu Linger quickly got up and rushed in front of him, stretching out her arms to stop him. Deacon Jin raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Mu Linger felt very uncomfortable under his gaze. She said seriously, "What do you want? Get to the point." Now, she could only negotiate with Deacon Jin. Otherwise, Deacon Jin might tell Uncle Ching about this matter, or he might tell the guards outside. No matter who Deacon Jin wanted to tell, this secret would definitely be his greatest bargaining chip. He could even use this secret to negotiate with June Xia. The more Mu Linger thought about it, the more flustered and anxious she became. She realized that once June Xia found out about this secret, June Xia would definitely suspect Ning Qing. Then everything that Ning Qing had painstakingly planned would be over. They would all be done for. Deacon Jin just sized her up without saying a word. You, whatever conditions you want, just state them. If I can do it, I will definitely do it for you, as long as you help me keep this secret." Mu Linger said seriously. "I can state any conditions." Deacon Jin sneered. "What conditions do you want to state?" Mu Linger was a little diffident. Who knew that Deacon Jin would say, "Sleep with me for a night, how about that?" Slap. An incomparably crisp sound broke the silence of the flower bed. Mu Linger's slap was so fast that even Deacon Jin couldn't pull it back. "Don't even think about it. Disgusting." Mu Linger cursed. Today, she had seen through Deacon Jean completely. Deacon Jin's face was in extreme pain. The corners of his mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. He walked around Mulinger and continued walking forward. After a long time, seeing that Mulinger didn't chase after him, he actually covered his slightly swollen face and laughed soundlessly. But who knew that Mulinger would quickly catch up and say to him very decisively, "Deacon Jean, I promise you. Swear that you won't tell anyone about this, or else you'll never be able to return to Winter Crow Country. You'll have to be a slave in your next life." As soon as she said this, Deacon Jin's face darkened. He suddenly turned around and walked towards Mulinger step by step. Mulinger was frightened by his sinister expression. She retreated step by step until her back was against the wall. There was no way out. However, Manager Jean continued to press closer, his seductive lips hovering by her lips, neither close nor far. Mulinger steeled her heart. She turned her head away and closed her eyes. "If you want to sleep, then go to your room." Deacon Jin's gaze turned cold. He suddenly raised his hand to slap her, but he didn't hit her in the end. Instead, he hit empty air. He said, Chapter 10:10. Deacon Jean said, "Mulinger, do you really want to be cheap? Fine, come with me." As he spoke, he grabbed Mulinger without any pity and dragged her all the way to his room. Mulinger's heart was beating so fast that it was about to jump out of her chest. She was in a daze and couldn't tell if this was reality or if she was dreaming. She stared blankly as Deacon Jean locked the door and walked towards her with a violent expression. She started to back away in fear. She started to realize the terrible consequences of agreeing to Deacon Jin's request. She started to regret it. Suddenly, Deacon Jean strode over and took her hand. She was about to speak, but Deacon Jean threw her onto the bed without any pity. Before she could get up, he was already on top of her. Mulinger's face was pale, and she started to tremble uncontrollably. She almost shouted out that she regretted it. However, she thought that if Deacon Jean took this secret to make a deal with Junicia, all of them would be finished. She had gotten into big trouble, and she couldn't drag everyone down with her. She lay on the bed and looked at Deacon Jean in fear. She suddenly realized that this man was very unfamiliar and scary. Deacon Jean didn't move for a long time and just stared at her. She became more and more flustered, and finally, she couldn't help but cry. Deacon Jean, can you change your conditions? Didn't you agree?" Deacon Jean questioned. "I beg you." Mulinger's tears flowed down. Deacon Jean suddenly punched the side of Mulinger's head. He roared, "Why did you agree if you were afraid? Why did you agree? Why don't you fucking cherish yourself? How do you expect me to cherish you?" As soon as he said that, Mulinger was stunned. What did Deacon Jean say at the end? Did she hear wrongly? She looked at Deacon Jean in confusion and fear. She suddenly realized that she could not see this man clearly. She could not understand his words and did not know what he wanted to do. She shrank back into the bed and curled into a ball, looking at him warily. She only felt that this man was like a crazy beast. Deacon Jean was also stunned. He looked at Mulinger and saw the confusion in Mulinger's eyes. He immediately avoided her gaze. For a moment, the two of them were quiet. The huge room was so quiet that it was like a silent world. In the end, it was Deacon Jean who spoke first. His voice was deeper than ever as he said, "Leave." Mulinger did not dare to move. Deacon Jean stood up and retreated to the side. Only then did Mulinger carefully get off the bed. Once she was far enough away from Deacon Jin's reach, she broke into a run. However, when she reached the door, she stopped. About the pregnancy, before she could finish speaking, Deacon Jin said coldly, "Owe it to me first." Scram! Mu Ling'er looked at him timidly and fearfully. She did not move. "Aren't you going to scram?" Deacon Jin said angrily. Mu Ling'er still did not move. Deacon Jin finally turned to look at her and said coldly, "I know how to write the word trust. You should scram as soon as possible." Mu Ling'er did not know how she escaped back to the courtyard. She did not dare to enter the room for fear that she would disturb Ning Jing and Ning Jing would discover that something was wrong. She sat alone in the corner of the room, thinking about how things had turned out this way. As she thought about it, she could not help but cry. She missed Chi brother. She missed her sister. She missed them so much. After Mu Ling'er left, Deacon Jin sat on the bed in a daze until dawn. He only woke up when he heard Tiger Roar's voice from outside. The tiger in Tiger's den roared 3 times a day in the morning, afternoon, and night, as if warning them not to have any thoughts of escaping. Deacon Jin washed his face with cold water, went out, and leaped onto the roof. He listened carefully to the Tiger Roar's voice. Every time the Tiger Roar roared, he would listen carefully. He did not know why, but he found the Tiger Roar's voice somewhat familiar. He remembered that he had never seen a tiger before, let alone heard the Tiger Roar's voice. It was the first time he had seen the king of the jungle, the tiger. He did not feel the threat in Tiger Roar's voice. Instead, he felt a sense of intimacy and relaxation. As he listened, his terrible mood from last night seemed to have gradually calmed down by quite a bit. In the following days, Deacon Jin did not see Mu Ling'er. Mu Ling'er also did not wander around the garden. The events of that night seemed to have never been discovered. However, the two of them remembered the promise they had made that night. Gu was currently on his way to Medicine City. He had long been forgotten by Mu Ling'er. Tang Li, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Ning Jing's letter had told him to control his impulses and obediently wait for winter and spring at the 3-way black market. Apart from helping with matters at East Origin Hall and arranging for the Tang sect to create hidden weapons for the East Qin army, he spent almost all of his time preparing for the return of Ning Jing and their child. He hired a group of old maids to prepare all kinds of clothes for Ning Jing and their child. He even prepared a thick booklet. Every day, he would ask Gu Beiyue questions about women giving birth and postpartum confinement. As long as Gu Beiyue gave an answer, he would write it down without missing a word. He even had Gu Beiyue make a long list of medicinal herbs to nourish Ning Jing's body after giving birth. According to the list, he would either send people to Medicine City, Medicine Ghost Valley, or search all over Cloud Realm continent. Or he would personally post a reward in the black market. That night, Tang Li had just finished a day's work. Seeing Gu Beiyue still sitting in the courtyard, he ran over. "Dr. Gu, introduce a few midwives and medical girls to me. I'll arrange for them to go to the Tang sect first," Tang Li said seriously. Gu Beiyue would never laugh at Tang Li for preparing too early, nor would he mention how annoying Tang Li was. He knew that if Tang Li wasn't so busy, he might have run off to Northernly long ago. Gu Beiyue knew how to treat illnesses, and he knew how to heal the heart. He was the only one he couldn't heal. Long Fei Yi only told him that the secret recipe for the dragon pill had been found and would be refined very soon. He didn't tell him about the old man of alchemy extorting Han Yunxi. Ever since he knew there was hope for the recovery of his shadow arts, he would sit by himself every night, quietly waiting in anticipation. "All right, I'll have Vice Academy head Shin arrange a few later," Gu Beiyue agreed readily. Tang Li was overjoyed. Thank you, thank you." "You're welcome," Gu Beiyue said lightly. Tang Li sat down beside him and smiled. Dr. Gu, you know so much. Whoever wants to be your wife in the future will be lucky. Gu Beiyue was stunned, then he smiled. He just smiled and didn't say anything. Dr. Gu, you're not young anymore. When do you plan to get married? Do you have a girl you like? Tang Li asked again. Gu Beiyue was still smiling and didn't say anything. Tang Li became serious. Dr. Gu, you're the only descendant of the Shadow Clan. You have to hurry up and spread the Shadow Clan's bloodline. Finally, Gu Beiyue stopped smiling. However, he still didn't say anything and just nodded. Tang Li didn't notice his glance. He remembered something and quickly said, Dr. Gu, if Ning Jing gives birth to a girl, let's name her Tang Jing. If she gives birth to a boy, let's name him Tang Ning. What do you think? Was everyone so excited about becoming a father? Did they have endless topics to talk about? Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. Tang Ning is fine, but Tang Jing and Ning Jing have the same name. It's not appropriate. Tang Li only just realized this problem. He frowned and muttered to himself, then I'll have to think of something else. If it's a boy, let's name him Tang Ning. If it's a girl, let's let Ning Jing name her, Gu Beiyue couldn't help but say. Leave some things for Ning Jing to worry about. Tang Li smiled a little embarrassedly. He rubbed his nose and stood up. Dr. Gu, it's getting late. You should get some rest. Gu Beiyue watched Tang Li leave and sat down again. He looked up at the crescent moon in the sky. There was a rare look of melancholy between his handsome brows. He was melancholy because of what Tang Li had just said. He was the only descendant of the Shadow Clan. The bloodline of the Shadow Clan could not be broken. On this mainland, there was another person who was even more melancholy than Gu Beiyue about the issue of having an heir. This person was none other than the ruler of Tianan, Long Tianma. Not long after the civil war in Northern Li broke out, Western Zhou's Emperor Kongqing married Princess Duanmujin to Tian, and Tian already had an empress, and Duanmujin was not a legitimate princess of Western Zhou. According to the rules and regulations, it was already an exception for Duanmujin to be conferred the title of noble consort. However, Long Fei Yi did not confer her the title of noble consort. Instead, he conferred her the title of imperial noble concubine, second only to the empress and assisting the empress in managing the 6 palaces. If Tian's harem was like before, with only 3 women, Mu Luiyue, the empress dowager, and the empress dowager, there would be nothing to worry about. At most, it would be Mu Luiyue and Duanmujin fighting one-on-one. In any case, the empress dowager had already gone crazy. She did not leave the house, and there was someone to take care of her. As for the Empress Dowager, she was already old and did not care much. Long Tianma had no choice but to hold a draft and choose 30 concubines in one go. For noble consorts, for imperial concubines, 6 imperial concubines, 6 noble personages, 5 Changzai, and 5 Ingwangs filled up Tian's harem. There were people who joked that the next time the emperor held a draft, he would first expand his harem. The more people there were, the more lively the harem would be, and the more lively the cliques would be. Mu Luiyue and Duanmujin's first fight was not simple. Neither of them personally showed up, but the harem was in chaos. Although Long Tianma had chosen many concubines, he had never spent the night in any of the palaces, nor had he summoned any concubines to serve him. In order to avoid the nanny sent by the imperial grandmother, he had already stayed in the imperial study for 10 days. The imperial grandmother did not come to the imperial study, but General Mu visited every day. That night, after General Mu and Long Tianma finished discussing the civil war in Northern Li and the war between Eastern and Western Qin, they had no intention of leaving. Instead, he bowed and knelt down on one knee. Seeing this, Long Tianma felt a headache. Great General Mu was an intelligent man and had never sought redress for his daughter's grievances or plead for leniency. He had always used the excuse of the imperial clan spreading its branches and spreading its leaves as an excuse to invite Long Tianma to spend the night in the inner palace. Long Tianma stood in front of the desk and ignored General Mu. Instead, he looked coldly at Mu Qinggu, who was standing to the side. Mu Qinggu immediately lowered his head. He was also in a difficult position. Your Majesty, at your age, the late emperor had already, before General Mu could finish his sentence, a eunuch's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Your Majesty, the imperial noble concubine was poisoned by a poisonous snake. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.